I'll be calling this meeting to order. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the flag of New Mexico. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, and see a symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. So moving on to the next item on the agenda is approval of work session agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the work session agenda.
I second the motion.
Okay, second by Commissioner Brown. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. County reports. Mr. Carrillo.
Mr. Chairman, Commission members, my report for this reporting period is currently we have 2 vacancies at the detention center. We also have 2 applicants that are processing through the application process. The head count for September 9th is 105. The average population has been 101. And the highest offense recorded for this period was probation and warrant violations. And of September 8th, there were 4 males in our special management. That's my report, sir.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks for the president.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. We did finish paving Rosedale Road. They're supposed to be in sometime this week to get the first application of striping done. I do have probably a week and a half of work left for ourselves to do to finish shoulder and then get the manholes raised up, and then that project will be complete. They'll have to come back around the 22nd, somewhere around that week, to put the second application of striping on, and it'll be done. Everybody seems to be quite happy with that out there, and I appreciate everybody's patience. We've been out there for quite a while, but they really seem to be happy about it. This week we're kind of getting caught up on resident complaints that we're behind on, and then we'll get back after it probably next week out there. That's all I have.
So thank you. Any questions?
Thanks.
Thanks for that work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Construction is coming to an end at the Whiskey Creek Volunteer Fire Department addition. They did have an extension requested due to a delay in the permit right in the beginning. So that permit delay from CID caused the building to be delayed, but we are still anticipating that finishing here shortly. Terminal renovations, the temporary terminal has been ordered with the tentative delivery date of October 1st, and that'll work with our schedule to get the contractor a notice to proceed once we can get advanced air moved into the temporary terminal. The Tyrone ADA, we're just waiting on the permits for the contractor so that we can issue a notice to proceed on that. And then Water Trust Board, I am currently working on applications for both Bandoni and the Fleming Tank flood control projects. Those resolutions are on the agenda. So that's my report. Any questions?
No. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Do you know? No report.
Next.
So then, okay, moving on to next item on the agenda here, public input. The general purpose of the Grant County work session is to inform the Grant County Board of Commissioners of the agenda items that will be addressed in the next regular meeting, and for the department heads and other elected officials to communicate with commissioners in regarding to matters in their respective departments. In accordance with Grant County Resolution number R-19-34, we welcome public input limited to agenda items only and will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Do we have anyone for public speaking?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just push this button.
There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Grant County Commissioners. Can I provide a written copy?
Just
So I wanted to provide a written copy because I'm going to talk fast and shorten this up. And thank you for taking public comment on the wild and scenic river designation before the commission in this resolution. I'm Tom Shelley, resident of Grant County and rancher on a stretch of Mogollon Creek. I'm representing myself today at this meeting. I love the river and wilderness. I play up there and I've run a ranch business up there. I'm a fifth generation rancher in the wilderness. We were there before Aldo Leopold came along in 1909. I've taken my kids and many other youth to the wilderness to show them what an amazing place it is. We've been all over it, and I'm a conservationist too. The problem that I'm concerned about is the misuse of these designations. And you may get a lot of promises of flowery good things to come from it, but there's plentiful examples of where that's been abused. And so I ask you to consider these comments. These designation areas are above and below my private land and all around the forest wilderness grazing allotment that we have held for 5 generations before this was even designated a wilderness. I'm asking this commission to reject or table a resolution on this until you really know what it means. I'm concerned that a lot of supporters have been told the real motivations they have been told the nice things, clean water, wildlife, things that already exist. I think there needs to be some honesty in these discussions and put everything on the table. You're being promised increased economic activity while some of these supporting groups won't tell you they want to trade long-standing proven economic activity for what? There's nothing stopping hiking and fishing now except the poor state of trails in much of the wilderness, except where the cattle are and some places where the backcountry horsemen have been. The proponents have been passing along frequently asked questions. One question that greatly concerns me is livestock grazing allowed in wild and scenic river corridors? Generally, the answer that they've given is that generally yes, the existing practices will continue. However, the agencies who administer this have written their answer more completely, and it says, the Act gives river administering agencies authority to adjust or eliminate livestock grazing or any other commercial use. So all this has been used as a basis for litigation. In Oregon, a federal judge ordered cattle off parts of the southeastern Oregon's Donner and Blitzen River. The ruling came after a coalition of environmental groups sued the Bureau of Land Management for failing to adequately protect and enhance nearly 75 miles of the river designated wild and scenic under federal law. In April of last year, a U.S. judge dismissed another complaint separate from this, which was originally filed by the Oregon Natural Desert Association and the Center for Biologic Diversity. You might have heard of them. 15 years of litigation, the judge finally agreed with recommendations to throw out the lawsuit because the plaintiffs haven't established that the U.S. Forest Service violated the National Forest Management Act and Wild Scenic Rivers Act.
You have 1 minute.
So you may wonder why these environmental groups plan to do with these designations once they get them through. You don't have to win a lawsuit to put a ranch out of business. So the other question, will it stop the Arizona water settlements diversion? Well, all these groups have stated that their reason for proposing this Wild and Scenic River Act is to prevent any diversion. So please consider Our businesses are families of multiple use, ranchers, farmers, and even mining. Appreciate you considering these comments.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Hagen Forward, and I'm also here in opposition of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. In echoing what the gentleman in front of me just said, the term itself, Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, is a very nice, wonderful term that we all want to embrace, but it's absolutely camouflaged. The Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is frustrating to many of our politicians because of lack of communication that we're receiving. But I'm going to let others talk on that. I'm going to talk about what it will do to those that own property and own water rights that are anywhere within a quarter mile of the high water mark on both sides of any river that is designated. So the folks that are in favor of this act, they are using terms trying to protect themselves. Terms like should be, we expect, to the best of our knowledge, and items proposed. And none of us are children here. We all know that those terms are actually a swinging door to allow them to change any of their positions. And their positions right now in the proposal is that no private property is going to be on any of the rivers that are designated, either recreational, wild, or scenic. But I'm here to tell you that there are an incredible amount of consequences that they're not telling you. Any river that they designate, if there is no private property on that river, we got to recognize that any of the tributaries to that river are immediately encompassed into wild and scenic. So the private property that are on the tributaries above and below the designation area just encompasses who knows how much private property. It's really quite frightening when you consider the consequences of how this thing will begin to grow on us. Now, as far as the private property rights go, let's assume that you have an acequia. You're on a tributary of the river, you have an acequia, you're growing crops. The acequia needs cleaning, it is silted in. Those that are custodians of this act can come to you and say, you cannot clean that acequia. You're changing the visuals. You're putting commercial activities onto your private property. If you're growing the hay or growing crops for sale, that's automatically a commercial activity, which is not allowed under Wild and Scenic River Act. I'll give you a specific here that certainly opened up my mind when I was reading the act itself. If you look under Section 6 of the Act, Paragraph 1, Item 1, it states, any owner of improved property is allowed occupancy not to exceed 25 years. So if you own private property on any tributary or any river that is designated wild and scenic, they're going to allow you to stay on your property for 25 years. That's frightening to me. It's your property and the federal government's going to allow you to stay on the property. Now, the next paragraph under G2, the right of occupancy and use is subject to termination should the owner act to improve the property in commercial use. There it is, right there in the act. And I'll rush through this. The problem is, if you own private property, the federal government is now annexing your property. If you're growing crops, if you have an orchard, if you're selling anything off of that property to make a living, that's commercial use, and that is not allowed. The Secretary of the Interior will send you a letter saying commercial use is not allowed within any designated tributary or river. So the water right goes away. You won't be able to use it. The land right is also eliminated. That is, for all of us, unintended consequences if we enact wild and scenic in our country here. But for those that are in favor of wild and scenic, it's their intended consequences to eliminate people's right to private property and water.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Anyone else for public speaking?
Good morning, Chairman Potts and Commissioners. I'm Jim Paxton. I'm the Chairman of the Sierra County Commission.
Good morning.
Good to see you this morning. I also want to speak on the Wild and Scenic River designation potential. I had a splendid 34-year career in the Forest Service, 22 years of that as a district ranger, 15 of those here on the Gila as the district ranger of the Black Range just across the hill. The Organic Act of 1897 passed by Congress became the foundation for the establishment of our national forest. The primary purpose for the forest reserves was for a continuous supply of water and timber for the citizenry. Emphasis was placed on local industry and the local citizens. The Gila National Forest was established in 1905, and the Gila Wilderness, first in the country, was set aside by the Chief of the Forest Service in 1924, thanks to the efforts of Aldo Leopold. There has been an effort by some to paint Aldo as a preservationist, and that is so wrong. He was trained as a forester. He did timber inventory when he was right here in the Southwest. Aldo understood grazing management, and he championed managing wildlife through responsible hunting. He was a multiple use advocate long before the passage of the Multiple Use Sustained Yield Act. Today, the lands and waters of the Gila National Forest are very protected and closely managed not only by the Forest Service, but by many watchful agencies and individuals. Any designation of wild and scenic or recreational river on the Gila and the tributaries is not merely another layer of bureaucratic red tape, but rather an attack on the citizens' ability to use their land and on the time-honored concept of multiple uses of the national forest. Beware of any designation that can take away private landowners' rights to free use and even ownership of their lands. Read the fine print in the Act, as the previous speaker noted. In Section 4A, the second paragraph, the government can assess the cost of acquiring necessary lands and of administering private lands within the area of designation. That's a real warning. And in Section 4B, the report shall include lands proposed for acquisition by act of Congress with concurrence of the governor of the state. Another warning. You may hear that there will be no condemnation of property outright, and that may be so. But in the Act, Section 6B, it states that no fee title to be lost by condemnation, but easements for public access can be obtained by condemnation. So a private landowner has no ultimate means to keep trespassers off his or her private land with a wild and scenic river designation. How is that fair? Even more egregious in the Act, Section 6G1, as was previously referenced. Owners retain rights for use of non-commercial for only a term of 25 years or until death of the primary term holders. So rights of the private landowner are limited to 25 years once an area is designated. So whatever the use is, you can't even have a camping area or a fly fishing operation or a hay field or an orchard. or the government's going to take it away from you? Please listen, folks. This is a dangerous and slippery slope that some environmental radicals are wanting to pull the wool over your eyes. Wild and scenic river designation is not a magical panacea to protect our streams and rivers. It is anti-private property. It is anti-small landowner. It is anti-multiple use that the national forests were founded on and have been operated under for over a century. And to me, in many ways, it's anti-freedom. I'm against any designation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak this morning. My name is Darren Albrecht. Everybody knows me as Bucky. I'm a Catron County Commissioner, and you're probably wondering why Catron County crazies down here in Grant County wanting to speak this morning. Let me start by thanking you for letting us have our AWSA meetings here in Grant County. Catron County really appreciates you providing a meeting place for us. This water is very important to us up there. And on that, I come here this morning to talk to you a little bit about wild and scenic rivers, and I won't take up much of your time. It seems like I'm always having to follow good acts, like I've just had to follow. It's kind of a tough thing to do. Wild and scenic river absolutely changes nothing as existing rivers today. These groups that want to establish the wild and scenic river have no plans. They're going to do nothing except lock everybody up. When the CAP entity was spoken to by a group of these people saying that they wish to establish wild and scenic river, our county government passed a resolution against it and sent that to Senator Udall, Senator Heinrich, and Congresswoman Xochitl Small. That was in May of last year. We've yet to hear from them. We invited them to come and sit down at the table to hear our concerns for this. All these people are doing is setting up potential litigation that will cost your county governments, our city governments, lots of money to fight to protect people's private property rights, their water rights, and the chance to develop any resource ability in our county to provide tax base and improve our way of life, especially in Catron County. We have decades of experience with these type of programs. And I don't mean to get off subject, but it is part of it. Spotted owl, wolf. None of these programs are productive or good for the people of our county. So, Commissioners, I ask you to consider not passing this, not allowing this in your county. Wild and scenic is just another lockoff and another aggression against people's private properties and the way they live in their counties. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, my name is Chris Overlock. I'm a resident of Grant County. I wasn't planning to speak, but I got to speak in favor of the wild and scenic designation if everybody's going to talk against it. I guess I'm one of those radical environmentalists or whatever you call it. But the Hilo River is very important to this area, and the wild and scenic designation will be a real positive to this whole area. And I just saw this morning that the Rio Grande is dry for 10 miles south of Socorro. So, I mean, we got to do everything we can to preserve our natural environment. And we preserve our natural environment, that helps preserve us people, us livelihoods. And, my ancestors came to the territory in 1881, but what matters is here and now. It's not all this other stuff. So please, yeah, I would encourage you to go with the wild and scenic designation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Anthony Gutierrez, and I'm a Grant County resident, and I'm a lifetime resident of the Gila Valley. I want to refer all my comments to the Wild and Scenic River FAQ that I'm sure all of the commissioners have received. We also received this through the New Mexico CAP entity, and although I'm not here necessarily to represent the CAP entity, I will speak on some of the comments that are made within here. And if you look on page 1, it talks about the wild and scenic rivers, and it talks about the first paragraph. Talks mostly about the free-flowing rivers and how they potentially affect our area. And I want you to pay specific attention to the word free-flowing. It also, on the second paragraph, refers to the Gila River as a place where families gather. I have actually a rather large family, and since in the past 50 years plus that I've been a resident of the Gila Valley, all I've seen is nothing but those gathering places and those rights that we used to have continue to diminish. How many places now, even the residents that used to live here, you can actually go to the river and enjoy the river? There's very few places now. As a matter of fact, probably the most popular places now are the actual lakes, which are Lake Roberts, Bear Canyon, and Bill Evans. Bill Evans is full during the summer. You can go all along the Gila River, and there's sparsely located people along the river because there's no longer that access that we used to enjoy. On the sixth paragraph of page 1, it talks about how the Wild and Scenic River Act protects the rivers and ensures water quality and enhances wherever possible. But on the third bullet of this paragraph, it says, prohibits the construction of newly federal licensed dams and other water development projects that could impact designated segments. I want to refer the term designated segments. While the resolution that's up before the commission, the title of the resolution says recognizing the special values of the Gila headwaters and supporting the wild and scenic designation. While the wild and scenic does take selected headwaters of the Hilo River, it also has an impact on its tributaries. It also has an impact on the area below Bill Evans. Below the area where the Cliff Gila, all of the agriculture, all of the citizens live, even the potential of a development of AWSA water. So if we continue down on page 2, it talks about the headwaters. It also talks about all the recreational areas and recreation that potentially that it supports. Now, on the second paragraph of page 2, it talks about recreational segments. Now, I would like for the commission to take a look at the map that they also provided in those same documents. If you can find a recreational segment on this map, you have pretty good. I need readers now, but you got to really pay attention to what the recreational segments are on this map. There's very few, and they're very, very limited. Those are the segments where you could actually provide recreational activities. For this same sentence, it says where families gather. I'd like to talk about the AWSA. The AWSA, as executive director, I'm not here to preach to you about what's going on, but it is a development of water. The portion of it that's not in here is the impact. They talk about impact of development. Impact is a word that they use, which I have on the last page of my document, is used for restrictions and for litigation. It's difficult to take the word impact and provide a basis for defense against litigation. This wild and scenic river designation is a means for the environmental communities to provide litigation. I'd like to provide just one more comment.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. 5 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Don Larson. I live down on the Lower Members. And I'd like to just make a comment that this time of year, many of our rivers in the state here go underground at different points, but that doesn't mean they don't feed aquifers down below. The Members in particular feeds the aquifer down in Deming, as most of you know. I spent a few years with the Forest Service, retired as a district ranger over in Arizona. It was a shock to me to go there and discover that the whole state had been declared wild and scenic on all of their streams. It was a whole new ball game as far as management went. Management of areas along streams was more and more difficult, especially as groups began to oppose livestock grazing. And to me, what I see in my many visits with Commissioner Brown, this is another step in his process to eliminate grazing in Grant County. I have a concern that the Forest Service does not have adequate resources to do monitoring, especially along the streams, and the environmentalists are not doing any monitoring. They're just expressing opinions of what they see, and it's often just a snapshot. It's not a long-term view of what's going on, especially over time. I would ask you to oppose this wild and scenic river designation because it takes away from grazing rights, it takes away from ranchers, it takes away from farmers who use the water from the rivers, and it ends up with streams that get no management at all. They become overgrown, the fisheries begin to deteriorate, and it's just a lose-lose for everybody. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is not my specialty, so my name is Darren Albrecht. I'm here representing the Grant County cattle growers today. I happen to be the president, and we have about 100 or approximately 100 families within the Grant County area here. Some go north to Catron, some to Luna County, some into Hidalgo County, and we got a great membership here in Grant County. And I'm here to discuss I'm thankful for the time that you've offered us, and I'm here to discuss the Hilo proposed wild and scenic proposal that's before you. Really, I would just say as the cattle growers, we are conservationists. We do truly care for our country. It's how we make our living, and we're asking you to oppose this or table it at this time till we get a little more information. Give opportunity for even more public comment, and really sort through the weeds here and make sure we know all the facts before we show our support for something this critical to what we dearly care about in the county. So I'd ask you to oppose it or table it at this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else for public speaking?
I'm not a public speaker, okay, but I do exercise the right I have to come here before the commission and tell you what I think, okay? This is my opinion. The issue is never...
Could you state your name, please?
J.T. Hagen. I live out at Cliff and Ranch out there, and I've lived there a while. The issue is never the issue. The issue is not about the river only, okay? It is always about power, control, and to extend the ability to sue. That's what the environmental community does best. They finance themselves with lawsuits and take control of federal, state, and private property. And in this case, it'll be also to take control of the water. You can put it any way you want to, but the issue is not the river. It's not the wild and scenic designation. It's power and control. And they'll control the usage of all of those areas, totally. They've done it entirely in the Gila National Forest with the spotted owl designation. And they really helped, didn't they? There's no now place for the spotted owl at all. It's burned. There's no logging, there's no use. Okay? And this is what we're looking at here. It's a control. It's about control. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Hazel Donaldson. I was raised out on the Gila, grew up there in Gila. And in 1979, my husband and I married, and we moved next door to Apache County in Arizona. We have since moved back and are residents of Gila again. I am here to talk to you about this wild and scenic designation and to ask you to vote no and to explain to you why. I spent the better part of 40 years, like I said, in Apache County, Arizona. It's a unique county. It's a very large county land-wise, but most of the land, all but about 10% of it, is held in federal or state, by federal or state entities, mostly federal. When I was living there, I came to realize how important it was to have local control of your natural resources, because in Apache County, our control was held on a federal basis. Now, I have a home in New Trioso, lived there for many years, and we were surrounded by that national forest, and every time there was an issue concerning the national forest, they would have public meetings. We would go, we would talk, sometimes we would plead, we would beg, we would do all of this, and it never mattered. And the reason it never mattered is because all of the decisions were taken care of either in bureaucracies in Washington, D.C., or in the federal courts, where they were determined by groups that had lawyers to go and sue the federal government. And that's what happened. We didn't matter. And so in Apache County, when we cried that you can't take our logging industry away from us, it made no difference. They took it anyway. I don't know how many of you remember, there used to be a sawmill in Eager, Arizona. It's not there anymore. And all those jobs went away, died, killed overnight. And nobody listened to us. Later, when we began to cry out about how overgrown the forests were, how they were in bad condition, how we were in the middle of a drought, we were just a tinderbox waiting to explode. Nobody listened. And we had public meetings. They had public meetings. They said, come, tell us what you think, and we did. But we didn't get to make the decisions. We told them there would be catastrophic fires. And guess what? There was. First came the Rodeo Chetasky fire, and it burned through, and the residents of Navajo County came and were taken care of there in Eager and Springerville. And you know, we took care of those people. We spent days there with all of the residents from Navajo County there in our little tiny town, and we were happy to do it. We felt their pain. But you know who wasn't there? All of the people who sued in federal court were not there. They didn't help. They didn't care. Like JT said, it's not about the people. It's not about the resource. It's about control. Never let go of local control. This is our land, it's our river, and we are neighbors. And I know if crises happen and push comes to shove, all of you will be there for us, and we would be there for you. But if you let control go to big bureaucracies or environmental organizations that are out of state, they won't be there for us. I've seen it happen. For 40 years, I watched it happen in Apache County. Time's up?
No, 1 minute.
1 minute. I have seen this firsthand. I know what happens. It's hard sometimes to deal with on a local level, but it's best. This kind of a relationship where it's neighbors helping neighbors, us taking care of our own natural resources, is the best policy. Please vote no. Please do not accept the Wild and Scenic River designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning. I'm Don Staley. I live on the Hilo River. My family moved there in 1921. A fact. They bought a farm. A fact. It had water rights. Fact. Those water rights were from 1875. Now, we have stayed on this farm, not all of it, because some of it was sold off. But the fact is that those water rights preceded New Mexico as a state, preceded the Forest Service as a Forest Service, preceded almost everything that is, and we still have that charter as in the Santa Fe as in 1875 for those ditches and the water rights. It is hard for me to understand how someone that is wearing rose-colored glasses can come and tell us that they're going to take those water rights away from us. I don't believe that the good Lord intended for that to happen. We know that the Hilo River was made right here in New Mexico in the Mogollon Mountains by a man we call God. It is beautiful. It always has been. And I believe that we can do whatever we want to with that river, and it's not going to change the beauty that's, and the love that there's. I would ask you to not support this scenic river and the wild river. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take our rose-colored glasses off and look at that river as what it really is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, board member, audience. For starters, I would just like to, matter of fact, my name is Lowell Walker. I'm actually the county assessor here in Grant County, born and raised here. Third generation native, and I would just like to say a few words. I understand it's we're here for preservation, we're here for the Hilo, but another thing that we really need to respect is also the bundle of rights of the property owners, and I would just like to leave it at that. Thank you once again, county commissioners, for allowing the work session on public input. I think our voice is very important here in Grant County. this is a work session, and look at all these people that are out here. Thank you very much for that, for allowing public input. I sit on the board of directors for the New Mexico counties, and matter of fact, on a couple of policy committees, and I just got appointed for the tax and rev committee, and I'm very happy about that because our voice is very important here in Grand County. Not only that, once again here in the Southwest, but I would like to throw a little bit of news. The New Mexico counties wins the 2019 Savvy Awards, rebranding the campaign. Up in Denver, Colorado, New Mexico counties won the 2019 Savvy Award, Outstanding Rebranding Campaign during the City, County Communications and Market Association Annual Conference in Denver this last Thursday, September 5th. The Savvy Award salutes the skilled and effective city, county, agency, or district professionals in creating, planning, and carrying our successful innovations and communications on marketing. Over 700 entries in 40 categories were received for the New Mexico counties. Was one of 72 first place Savvy winners to achieve, and this is recognized. So anytime that anything comes out here for the state of New Mexico, I want to give it a great big hand, and I want to give, sitting on the board of directors for the New Mexico County, gives a great pleasure on that. I won't be here on the Thursday for the county commissioners meeting because we actually have the gathering of the counties, and I want to do as much as possible, sitting on the board of directors, to promote Grand County more than anything else. So if anybody wants to share anything to promote this beautiful county here in the state of New Mexico, please let me know, and I'll be in my office, in the assessor's office. So thank you very much, commissioners, and once again, we really appreciate you allowing us to give our voice here in Grand County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else for public speaking? No one else? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your input. Moving on to the next item of the agenda is presentations. With presentation from Hilo Regional Medical Center. Hilo Regional Medical Center. Ms. Arias.
Thank you, Commissioner Ponce and other commissioners, and Charlene Webb. Thank you so much, and thank you, audience, for being here today. This is most impressive, and I'm honored to be a part of this today. I have several things to share with you. We're very excited about these. As you know, we have applied for our Level 4 trauma designation, and with that has come many things. It is a year-long process of data collection, process improvement, policy writing, exposure to the community, teaching in the community. And so I want to share a few things that have happened with that. We have what is called a decontamination area in our hospital. And this is when people are exposed to various chemicals or agents out in the field, and they are brought to us, and we have to decontaminate them before they enter our building. We recently had an exposure in Lordsburg about a month ago, and we did not know the volume of this contamination, but people were arriving at our hospital, and we treated them all very quickly in our decontamination chamber. It's a staging area, and people are trained in this from our hospital so that no one in our hospital is exposed to any kind of agent that we don't want. With this also, we have developed a trauma team, and everyone on the trauma team is alerted when we get a potential trauma in so that they can respond appropriately and very quickly. I do want to tell you that this is an immense amount of training that goes into this collaboration of membership on this team. It is comprised of different departments such as respiratory, laboratory, radiology, nursing, emergency staff, emergency physicians and nurses, EMS providers. And so this is a true collaboration and training. But we recently had a gunshot wound that came into our hospital, and had it not been for the training that was ongoing every single day, this patient probably would not have made it, and it was a very young man. But it all goes to show why training is so important and why this service of trauma is so important to our community. I told you briefly about this training that our trauma coordinator is putting together, and it's called Stop the Bleed. Stop the Bleed is an immediate response when somebody has a bleed, and the bystander is trained on how to apply pressure or a tourniquet or first aid to this victim to prevent further bleeding or a bleed out. We are involved in Train the Trainer, and these people that we are training will go out to the community in community areas such as big businesses, schools, anywhere where you could have a gunshot victim or any kind of victim that has a bleed, that we can prevent their demise. Further news, we've had some change in our ER medical director leadership. Dr. Koch is our new director, and he is going to be working with us on several initiatives. One of those is to decrease the wait time of patients getting in to see our emergency room staff, decrease the time from the physician deciding to admit the patient till the patient actually gets to the inpatient unit, decrease our transfers going out of our city, and compliance with initiative with our five-star rating initiative for CMS compliance. Other issues that are going on and initiatives are with our quality department. We have a program that is being put together right now to better manage our 650 contracts that we deal with always. A program to manage our policies and procedures, which is an electronic program. An electronic program which we are just recently initiated to report and track all of our events of concerns, which anyone that is an employee can enter an event so that our quality department looks at it, and we look at better ways to decrease any of these events. I shared with you some time ago that we were planning our employee engagement survey. This survey starts tomorrow, and we're very excited about this. We are encouraging 100% participation with our employees, and it is all anonymous and it's all electronic, and the more participation we get, the better we're able to rectify any of the concerns that our employees have. But this program is not just getting a survey, it's what you do with that survey. And this is a year-long process in which we get the results, which is statistically sound, and we present this not only to our board members, to the commissioners, to our whole hospital, but also we dive down into the specific departments to see what their input is. Then we gather the employees of these various departments for their input on how to rectify this and make things better. So we're very, very much looking forward to this survey and getting that information so that we can share that with everyone and start working on how to build better relationships with our employees. Several things I wanted to share with you is that this week we will be celebrating with our auxiliary 50 years of their being in our hospital. It's a very exciting time for us, and that is this week that we will be celebrating that in a luncheon. We also have instituted our teleneurology. It went live, and so that teleneurology is beginning in the emergency department and in the ORs for acute neurology symptoms. Two things that I wanted to also share with you as far as our community outreach On September 27th, we will be hosting a blood drive in our hospital, and as you know, we will be acting as part of the Members Health Fair that's also this month. On our recruitment, we extended an offer to another general surgeon, and we are waiting for his response. We also had an on-site interview with an ENT, and he is asking for a proposal letter. We did also host an on-site interview with a pediatrician, and we did not feel that this was going to be a good fit for our area, so we did not extend an offer. Lastly, I wanted to share with you that thanks to Commissioner Edwards, we have been involved with a subcommittee of ongoing initiatives with Dr. Ski, with Dan Otero from HMS, and our hospital to see what we can do actively to look at how healthcare needs to be in the future for Grant County. We hosted one of these meetings last Friday in our hospital, and I can tell you the most important thing I think that we all gained from this meeting, which Richard was a part of that meeting, and the CFO from HMS, was a very, very good dialogue. I felt it was very good dialogue between us on what are our issues, what some of the history has been in this community for health care, because I think that, Richard and I are relatively new to this county when you look at the history. And of course, Dan used to work at the hospital. Dr. Ski used to have a great deal to do with the hospital, but has been in this community for some time. And so listening to the dialogue between what worked in the past, what we could have done better, and what we can do in the future, I think was most helpful. I think one of the things that we all gained from this, and I'm sure Dan will speak a little more to this when he gives you his update, was that there are many things that we can do to work better together. One of those things is not duplicating efforts, not with family medicine, because we need family medicine. People are still waiting to be seen by family medicine, and we need to have that ease of access for them, because people who go to family practice, they need to get in to see them that day. So we need more internal medicine, we need more family practice, not just for the city, but for our county and surrounding counties, to bring patients to our hospital and to our environment. But we don't want to duplicate specialists, because specialists are very, very expensive. So if we see that Dr. Ski is bringing in one specialist, there's no need for us to duplicate that. But maybe we bring in another specialist and he will not have to do that. We're very, very fortunate in this area that we have these different entities. And I have spoken to this before, because all of these entities are different and they bring different talents to this area. We have an HMS, which is an FQHC, that does a spectacular job at what they do. And they have funding. And this is so wonderful that they're able to go out in the community and provide outreach, which some of us are not able to do. Then Dr. Ski has an immense capacity at recruiting, and he has an immense business strategy, along with his quality and along with his clinical knowledge, which only augments what we have in our hospital, which is the entity of being a hospital. So we don't need to be looking at this as three different separate entities that only function independently. We need to be able to collaborate and feed on each other's ability and feed on each other's talents to better the healthcare environment for our whole community. So I do appreciate the efforts of Commissioner Edwards. I really appreciate Dr. Ski and Dan and all of the entities coming together to sort out what we can do best for our community. So if you have any questions, I would like to entertain those.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have Richard Stokes here for our finances.
Good morning. This is the the report for the month of July, which is the first month of our fiscal year. So for July, we're reporting a profit of $7,997 versus this time last year we reported a $514,000 loss. Which for EBITDA for the month of July, we reported a $235,000 EBITDA number, which is an approximation of cash flow. This time last year, we had a negative EBITDA of $112,000. Cash collections for July was 31% of charges. Our cash to the previous month's net revenue ran at 123%. So we had a very good month, our cash collection month, and I'll talk about that right now. So our cash collections for July was $4.5 million versus this time last year was $4.17 million, about a $340,000 increase. Our days cash on hand stayed steady at 25.8 days. And again, our year-to-date profit was right at $8,000 versus $514,000 loss last year. So we kind of skimmed by for the month of July. August looks like it may be a little bit tighter, but we're getting those numbers right now. We still have a lot of work to do in the financial area of the hospital. You know, last year we kind of did a lot of, let's kind of bust down the wall and let's get down to the foundation and let's get the foundation rebuilt. That's what we did last year. This year we're going to start adding to that wall. We're going to start initiating programs specifically designed to increase cash flow further upstream within the revenue cycle. So we're really excited about the possibilities this year as we progress. Any questions?
Commissioners, any questions?
I guess I have one, and I'm sorry I didn't ask it earlier because it's more about Ms. Arias' presentation, but I wasn't fully formulated at that point. And it's also the case that I have not been as active as Commissioner Edwards, so I wasn't sure if she was already aware of what's going on with this. But I was, of course, extremely pleased to hear your discussion of collaboration and your vision that as a community we have all these different assets and the hospital is not a lone actor. I think you know that I agree strongly with that perspective. And one issue I've brought up related to that was the strategic plan's call for opening clinics in other areas. The most obvious case where this appeared not to be consistent with collaboration was in the Baird Clinic. So I guess my question is, well, A, can we have an update on what's going on with that clinic? And B, is there a chance that you're changing your mind about whether the hospital belongs in that business, in that location?
Thank you for asking that question. Nothing has changed since our last report when we talked about the architect and we're waiting for the financial piece to come. I am very, very, very pleased that HMS has been able to open up another site and they're doing quite well. I don't want you to think that this is just a competitive piece of what we're doing. Competition is healthy. Competition brings high quality. Competition brings ease of access to patients. And what we want to make sure of is that we are part of meeting the needs of our community. The Bear community is not as small as it looks. It's pretty large. I mean, you have the mining community, you have Membridge, you have Baird, you have Hurley coming in. What we want to make sure of is that people have a choice. And that's very, very important. It's just when we look at Hilo Regional exploring home health, exploring hospice. Those things exist here, but maybe there aren't enough for the people to really have a choice. And when I look at what exists and what did exist in the past, yes, I know that I have heard that Hilo's home health, Hilo's hospice lost money, and a lot of money. Well, we operate a lot of things that lose money, right? We have our psychiatric area that loses money. We have EMS that loses money, but we make money other places. But having a choice for people is extremely important. So, yes, I think we are still going out to Baird, and we're just waiting for those finances to come in to see if it's really a book of business that we can afford to invest in. We want to, we think it's the right thing to do, and I think that there's enough population in all of that area to support more than one clinic. So yes, we are still looking at it, but that's the most current update I can give you on that.
Thank you.
I do want to say one other thing, though, about that. You know, our finances, as you know, when I came, were not good, to say the very best. And as we dig and dig and dig into the processes of revenue cycle management, we are forced to say things were not handled appropriately. Okay, that's history. What matters now is what we're doing to rectify it and how we're building a stronger foundation for our community, not just for our hospital, not for me, certainly not for Richard, but what we're doing for all of this community to be strong. We know that we have to do a better job at that, and I know that our home health would have done better if we had been smarter with our finances. I know hospice is a need in this community. As our population is aging, we must be able to support our population with hospice. We have a cancer center. We can't just say we have a cancer center and not be able to follow up with a strong hospice for that continuity of care. That continuity of care does not end until that patient is gone. That is so very, very important. The things that all of these entities have and share is the piece that says we all share in people who are homeless. We all share in poverty. We all share with lack of resources. We all share with lack of accessibility for these people, all people. We suffer from opiate abuse and substance abuse. We suffer in this community by not having access for child and adolescent psychiatric services, which is growing. And so looking at what all of our needs are, we should be able to come up to say, I can't be everything to all people, but together we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, commissioners?
I would like to make one comment about your, Commissioner, your comment on competition. You know, when we opened our meeting on last Friday, which, you know, I was pleasantly surprised. I believe it was Dan that made the comment that, you know, let's face it, we're all in competition. Okay, so let's put it out on he put it out on the table. And we all kind of looked at each other, we nodded, yes, we are. To some extent, we are. But where we can cooperate, we want to make an effort to do that. And so, like, when it comes to the program that HMS has funding for, that's not, it's outside the scope of our service line. But we want to support HMS because they do a great job at it. They have the resources to do it. So we spend a lot of time talking about, okay, we are competitors in some regard, but we also can work cooperatively. And, to that point, I raised an issue at the end of the meeting the next day, or a couple of days later. The issue I raised was received by the person I needed to receive it. They were in my office and we had a conversation about that particular issue. And that conversation continues today. So, I want you to know that I think we've all kind of turned the page on, we're here together. We're going to compete, but we're also going to help one another where we can. So, that's all.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to item B on the presentation, Hidalgo Medical Services Report, Mr. Otero.
Good morning, Chairman Ponce, Commissioners, and County Manager Webb. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide an update. Edith and Luann are handing out a report that we're going to briefly go over here in a few minutes. But before we do, I just have a couple of comments, and we also have a guest that I would, with your permission, like to invite up to the podium to say a couple words. It is absolutely an exciting time for HMS. Still continues to be an exciting time for us. Lots of wonderful things happening, and I hope that you saw in recent news that HMS received the Health Center Quality Leader Award for having clinical quality at the top 20% of the nation. Top 20% of the nation. We're extremely proud of that. We've been putting a lot of work into that effort over the last 3.5 years. It's very intentional, but we won't be happy till we reach the gold standard, which is the top 10%. And the other thing that's an exciting time for us is the main purpose of our presentation today is to cover the Grant County Collaborative Senior Center Plan. And there's some people I want to acknowledge, but I know that Lieutenant Governor Morales is on a tight schedule, so I'd like to have him, if it's okay with you all, and Chairman, to have him come up and say a couple words on this important initiative.
That would be fine.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. It's good to be here. It's always good whenever I can do work that impacts statewide initiatives, but be able to come home and to do some of this work. And I just want to say, just on behalf of the Governor, on behalf of Cabinet Secretary Holtram, who are right now sitting in a cabinet meeting, that we're here and we're appreciative of the work that HMS has shown and the leadership, as well as the support from Freeport to really give us a map and guide us in the direction that is needed. We know across the state of New Mexico, when we look at the impact of healthcare and what it means to our senior or aging population, this is going to be critical and to ensure that we get this right. So when we're looking at resources and allocation of dollars to communities, this will be something that we're hopeful and we're optimistic that we're going to get some of the results that are necessary to make those wise decisions. I'd like to commend Commissioner Edwards on your leadership as well and putting together community stakeholders who will have an input to show how we can do the things that need to be done in the state. I'm very proud of being from Grant County, and I'm proud of the work that's been done. When we look at initiatives that have started that have had statewide impact, for example, the Firstborn program, our community, our Grant County Community Health Council, who weathered the storm of many of the difficult financial years. And the list can go on and on of many of the initiatives that the state has benefited from that started right here in Grant County. I believe that this is another one of those initiatives that we're going to see that gives us, hopefully, the results that we're looking for. With that, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, I stand here in support, and I apologize that our schedules are a little backed up as I'll be touring some of our facilities across the county as well in hopes of giving a report back of what our facilities have been doing and what needs are still here. But I do plan on staying here a little bit to hear Mr. Otero and just want to say thank you for this opportunity to learn as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Morales. Really appreciate the support. I talk about it being an exciting time. To echo some of the things that Ms. Arias said, there's a lot of opportunities for this community and the Southwest region to enhance healthcare. And if we don't come together to do that, there's only one person that loses. And when I say one person, I'm talking about every patient and client and citizen in this community. That's the bottom line. And just to briefly echo, of course there's going to be competition. And I echo her comments that it's going to improve quality for all of us, absolutely. But there are a lot of things that we could do better together. That's the intent of those conversations. And again, Commissioner Edwards, we do appreciate your leadership in pulling that together. So I want to move right into this report. You have a lot of work that's gone into developing this report. I don't think any of us will look at the recommendations that we'll share in a few minutes with any surprise. But what we can look at this report as is a tool to drive change. One of the commitments that we make at HMS is, we talk, we look, and we decide. Is this something we're going to do? If it is, let's do it. Let's implement it and let's make it work. And that's why you've seen the successful growth and delivery of enhanced services at HMS. This is one of those items. When Edith Lee, our Chief Support Officer, were in my office talking about the needs of our seniors in our service area, there was a lot of passion that came into that conversation, and that was the initial conversations that got us to where we are right now. We applied for the Freeport-McMoran Community Investment Fund in fall of 2018, and we received those funds to pull this research and this report together. And I immediately want to jump to thanking Laura Phelps and Ms. Angie Harmon from Freeport for being here today. Again, it just shows their commitment to the community, and it's really appreciated because this has been very helpful. I also want to acknowledge the core team quickly. Ms. Ann Hayes Egan has been our core, I'm going to call her researcher, I don't know if you like that title, but she's the one that's been doing the layman's amount of work on that, and of course in conjunction with Krista Bolt, our very own Krista Bolt. And of course Edith Lee, Dr. Pedro Armendariz, and Luan Velasquez were all here today. And then in your handouts, you should have a list of 42 community members. This is the advisory committee that came together to support this initiative and provide feedback, great conversations, and recommendations at the end that we'll talk about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Egan to give a brief overview of the report, and then I'll come back up and talk about the recommendations and next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stand over here because I'm vertically challenged. I'm Reverend Dr. Ann Hayes Egan, and it has been a privilege to work with all of you all. It has been a multi-month process. I think we spent about 8 months. We've had monthly meetings of the core team. We've had about 4 different meetings of the advisory committee, which has been very deeply engaged. What I want to walk you through are a couple of key issues that we've uncovered, many of which I think, as you mentioned, Dan, are already known, what they mean for the future, and the process that we used. I'll start with the process that we used. We wanted to really have this as a community dialogue, so we created the core team, and then we invited, as you said, 42 people from the community that represent so many walks of life. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to present, Mr. Chair and Commissioners and County Manager Charlene Webb. You're a member of the advisory committee, as is Commissioner Alicia Edwards, has been very involved in one of our last town hall meetings and provided some excellent input. And what we got is a tremendous amount of input from across the community. We did primary and secondary data analysis to look at not only the health data, but I think most of us know that our community health is driven by so many factors that include economic factors. So part of what we've discovered in the primary and secondary data is that there's been a very slow loss of population, jobs, and capital in the county. It's not as much of a loss as we see in the surrounding counties. So this county is really a hub in many ways. And there's been some wonderful economic development work that has gone on, and there's great potential for this work to contribute to the economy. When we look at health issues, what we see is in New Mexico has moved from being the 39th in proportion of older adults in the U.S. to being 4th. And so that's what a man named Ken Dykewald calls the age wave. Grant County is ahead of our state. So if we look at this first graph here, and I've plotted a number of counties, Grant County has one of the fastest county age waves that we can see. Sierra County has a higher age wave. But so what that means is the issues of older adults, as we move forward in the next 10 or 15 years, will permeate every part of our lives, from our health care to our number of handicapped parking places at Walmart, to our walkability, to everything, our housing. And that's what we discovered in this process. So after we did the primary and secondary data analysis, we had a chance to get input, not only from our advisory committee discussions, but we had a survey. And the survey included paper surveys for people that are served by commodities, because we wanted to really make sure that we heard from the poor, who are often the first and most deeply affected. And then we had an online survey that the advisory committee helped shape. And we had 524, I think, responses to that survey from people from all walks of life, primarily middle-aged and older, some younger people, and people identified needs and gaps and priorities for services. In addition, we had key informant interviews. We talked with about 35 different individuals, and then we also had key informant groups at senior centers, where we talked with about 80 different people overall, and then we had a key informant meeting with the Western Institute for Lifelong Learning and a couple of others, so that we gathered information from many different small groups and sort of put that all together to see what are the common themes that cut across all of these discussions. And then we had 5 different town hall meetings. We had meetings in different parts of the county, so that people from Baird and Hurley and Santa Clara and Membris and Gila and Silver City and different parts of the county had a chance to come together and talk. And some of those were really small meetings. The smallest, I think, was Hattipa. But then we had some larger ones. And what we got was great information from those discussions. And you can see the list of the needs and service gaps, and many of those are not surprises. But people that are poor, that are living on limited incomes, they're huge needs, and they'll be growing if we look at the age wave. And then there's need for home care, for more medical specialty services, transportation, and a better mix of affordable and safe housing. Better continuum of integrated care, which I'm so glad that CEO Tafi Arias talked about the sort of partnerships that are happening, and you talked about that as well. And then to have support and quality of life. If we look at the back page here, there are important priorities for the future, and what we've done in this report, and we'll probably have extra copies of it available as well as online. And I think Dan can speak to these recommendations. And what we're looking at is, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you. We have broken recommendations up into those that are going to be easy to implement, that require a little bit of extra work on our part, those that will be a little harder, and those that are the hardest are the ones that are the most complex and that cost. But the neat thing is that there are ways that all of us can contribute. And if we look at this list here, what can local government do? They range from things with planning, putting the summaries on websites, being a convener. You all play such an important role with that. Serving as partners. There's a partnership already going on, and then encouraging constituents to be involved. And I would like you to speak to the recommendations.
Thank you, Ann. So your recommendations begin on page 63 of the full report, and of course there's a summary in the handout that we provided. And there's also a grid that starts on page 71 that you can look at some of the detail. I think, for me, again, to stress, it's been great work, and a lot of caring, committed people came together to provide feedback. And we went through a rank ordering process in order to get to the priorities and the priorities of the advisory committee. So the first phase is done, right? the real work starts now. This is when it really matters. And so let me walk through those just briefly, and I'm going to start with the first recommendation was improve access to community services and basic needs resources for older adults with limited resources. So this is a basic needs situation, and we all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we don't get this one right, providing those other high-cost services are not going to be relevant. So there's some immediate wins here, and again, as Ann said, if you look at the green items, these are the ones we're going to move fast on. Directory of community services, so that our seniors have a place to go and know what services are in our community. And of course, HMS is already starting the process for becoming a benefits enrollment center, because we're already the community expert for that with our family support services model. And of course, all the way up to the most complex model of a PACE model that provides these services to our seniors across our system. But that one would come later. And I'm going to move to now to recommendation, the second recommendation, letter B, build a quality of life for older adults in the county. The advisory committee felt really strongly about this, right? As we ramp up resources and find and build resources for this population of important citizens, we also need to make sure that they have a quality of life there. And again, between the partnership with the county and HMS to ensure that our senior services and our senior centers are effective. We also have other partners like the Institute of Lifelong Learning to help engage our seniors in quality of life. Providing them with information and newsletters, and one of the big items, the third one on this list, is they want to be more engaged in the community through volunteer and or paid positions, and these are the seniors themselves. So I think that's an important strategy that can be done relatively easy. Moving on to the third recommendation, letter C, expand and diversify affordable housing options available to older adults. This one, as you can see, is becoming more difficult. These are high capital items to find and design housing options, but a crucial one. It is one of the basic needs of any human is to have safe housing. And so to come back to the partnership with the state, Hidalgo Medical Services is working in conjunction real closely with the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the secretary of Department of Health, Kathy Kunkel, in Hidalgo County because of the kind of emergent situation we're dealing with down there. But we've been talking about the connection to the work that's happening here in Grant County. So we're looking at ways to potentially move towards the greenhouse model for our seniors, as well as reinvigorating any nursing home issues that are continuing to arise. So housing is a big one for us and a priority that we'll continue to work on. And then the next one is recommendation, letter D, develop better access to medical specialists closer to home. And you heard Kathy talk about that. That was a great outcome of our meeting last week, is to come together and say, okay, who's going to be bringing in the pediatricians and who's going to be bringing in other specialists to meet that need. But there's another element here of specialists. I've been in conversations with other healthcare systems around the southwest part of the state to collaborate and have those specialists come to Hidalgo County and Grant County on a route. Come and see us so that people don't have to go to a cardiologist and those kinds of things. We're open to that. Again, working to make those numbers work is the tricky part, but we continue to try to make that happen. And the last one, although it ended up as the last recommendation, letter E, develop more transportation resources, especially for those most isolated. Again, we specialize in that with our senior service program, but it's an item where all of the healthcare systems need to come together to look for ways to partner with the county and Corte Caminos, and let's meet that need. I think that could be a great win and a relatively easy win. Again, it's great to call and get an appointment with a provider, but if you can't get there to get the services, again, it just does no good. So those are the recommendations, and I think just to put a little bit of solid next steps around it, there was a couple of these items that HMS is going to take the initiative immediately and start working on. However, there's members of the advisory committee that have committed to coming together and keep this thing moving forward. So we're immediately going to continue to meet, start talking about next steps and who in the community can help us move these items forward, and also develop legislative actions that we can bring to our legislators this year to get additional financial support. So with that, I will open it up to any questions for any of us, and I did have a request from Chris to say a couple words, but I'm going to save that to the end if I may. I'd like to answer your questions first. That's okay.
Mr. Otero, I mean, one of the biggest concerns that I always get is that transportation to clinics, transportation to Hilo Regional from our elderly residents. And so my question to you would be is, what can we as county commissioners do? I understand there's Code de Caminos, I understand that part, but I also understand there's certain laws that, get in the way of this. So what suggestion would you give us as a county commissioners how we can help with that, or just help our community with that?
In my opinion, we need to combine our resources. The federal laws have been softened, and Medicare now will actually reimburse for transportation for the Medicare recipients, for example. Medicaid has reimbursement for some of the Medicaid transportation issues. So it's a matter of combining our resources to make sure we can cover the scope of our region, and I think that's the tricky part. And I mentioned in one of my reports recently when we were changing our care delivery model in the mining district, we were actually getting ready to sign the papers, to get transportation for those community members into our community, and we were going to put them on a route. So it's doable, right? But once we got the mobile bus in Baird, or Santa Clara, I held off on that decision. But we just need to come together, and we need to sit specifically around that and say, how can we help our seniors or other members get transportation?
Okay, no, thank you. Any other questions?
This is amazing work. Thank you so much for everyone involved, for all your hard work and dedication, and thank you so much, Freeport, for funding this. This is something that I feel like our community has needed to do for a really, really long time. So my thanks to everyone for doing this. My question is, I'm sure as you all know, my interest is in that basic needs arena. And I'd like to know a little bit more about how or where you define that basic needs. What is that? And is that in the report somewhere?
It is. There's, again, I think it's page 64 that I referenced you, has a very detailed description of the priorities and what those mean. But it's everything from food, housing. There's a portion of that is transportation, and I think just being very specific on that, as well as specific on the. I'm drawing a blank on the name. Forgive me. Going too far here. Very specifically in moving forward with the Benefits Enrollment Center will help us fill some of those needs in addition to the family support services that we already provide.
So one of the things that I think is, and my comment is not meant to say that you guys didn't think about this. This is a comment that I think the whole community needs to think about, is when we're looking at meeting people's basic needs, there are other organizations outside of the healthcare system that are working on meeting people's basic needs, and that we have to continue to support as organizations because they are key in providing basic needs resources for people. So yes, they need to know who those organizations are, but we also need to understand as a community how important it is to support those organizations that are providing those services, like commodities distributions and things like that. So,
thank you, Commissioner Edwards, and I completely agree. There's a need for better collaboration, not only awareness, but coming together to make sure we're not duplicating. And what's important on this whole effort is it wasn't just healthcare, right? This is truly holistic. It's a holistic report to ensure that we hit all the aspects of the human condition for our seniors.
Well, I think that the thing that we have to be really aware of as a community is that all of this critically important service that we need to provide is going to be really expensive, and the only way we're going to be able to do it is through collaboration. So thank you again for taking the lead on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Edwards, for mentioning that, because there are so many different agencies and groups, both in the formal and the informal network, and trying to drill down in that and to create the kind of support you talk about is critical. And I think as that's done, what's exciting is that the kinds of jobs and opportunities that can be created to address these will be part of economic development.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any further questions?
Any other questions?
No. Just as a final comment, if I may, just to stress that HMS and the HMS Board of Directors leadership team is extremely proud to have taken the lead on this important initiative. You know, we talked about what is a community health center. I want you to focus on that first word, community. And we truly are committed to our communities, and that's why we took this on. And I'm really proud of the way the communities come together. And I think Mr. DeVolt wanted to say a couple words. So thank you again, Commissioners.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone, and I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to work on this project and to continue the work of it, so thank you all. I'm one of those seniors. I'm 67. I live here, and this will be my home until I live somewhere else, wherever. But it occurs to me that it is less than 11 years until the age wave, as in this report, hits us. And when I think about this, I think it's always, to me, the invitation of that old saying, if not now, then when? And if not me and you and us, then who? So let's get in front of this and get some work done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the reports are pretty impressive. I also like, you know, that they looked at the social aspect of it, because sometimes some of the best medicine doctors, you know, can't give. It's companionship, talking, being out there and giving them something to do. So you guys did wonderful. I applaud you and thank you, and hopefully we can help you move forward. Appreciate that. Moving on to the next item, presentations, discussion regarding Silver City Cycling Group proposed trails near Town Park. Ms. Pearson.
Good morning. My name is Martin Pearson, and I'm here representing the Silver City Cycling Group, along with Misha, who also sits on the board of that group. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this discussion in front of you all today. This is the beginning of an idea that we've had that I look forward to sharing with you all. A little bit of the backstory about this: our group is currently engaged in improving local trail systems alongside the Forest Service and the town. I don't know if any of you have seen the new trails that are going in and some of the work that's been done on Boston Hill, but the town had an incredibly forward-thinking attitude of being able to improve some of the system trails there that were getting very difficult to hike or ride mountain bikes on. We also have been working directly with the Forest Service through our own volunteer agreements with them, and also through our special use permits. And we just recently, 2 weekends ago, the Signal Peak Challenge happened up in the Signal Peak area. In the build-up to that event, we were able to get about 10 miles of trail cleared that was pretty much impassable. There was quite a lot of down trees, and you could really see that people had not been using the trail system, and so in order to make the race safe and happen, there was a lot of volunteer trail work that happened there. One of the things that we have been actively thinking about is if and where does it make sense to put potential new trail systems in. And Misha brought it to my attention and our group's attention, and I think you're all looking at a copy of this map, right? You have a hard copy in front of you. That there are about 60 acres of land that sort of sits right between Baton Park and the Fort Baird trail systems. Currently, there are a couple of roads going through there that were put in. Those would be sort of the thicker yellow lines kind of moving through the system there. And those roads were put in a way that sort of, in my opinion, really sort of defines why it is important to be looking at either doing a lot of trail maintenance or considering putting in new trails completely, because you often see stuff that's very point to point. And obviously this map doesn't show a contour, but what we're looking at on that upper line is a hill that I regret to call it this in public, but it's actually known as Puke Hill by the kids that run it in the cross-country race. When they get to that point, they're trying so hard, they're going up the hill, and it's really steep, which if you think of any steep roads that you know of that are dirt roads, they end up pretty much becoming water chutes, and water moves down them, brings debris with it, causes a bunch of erosion, and makes it generally unsafe. And we're seeing that in a lot of our single track systems dotted around the area. And so the thought with this particular 60 acres was, could we potentially come up with a trail system that offered people that were recreating at Baton Park an opportunity to get out and either hike or ride? And could we then use that trail system to connect into the existing system in Fort Bed over to the left side there? And what you would see on your map is the green triangle in the upper right-hand corner of the area would be effectively a trailhead for at the Baton Park area. And down in the bottom left-hand corner, the two starred areas, which are here, would be where the trail would effectively start and finish. It wouldn't have to be directional, but my guess is that given the hillside and the slope, it could potentially ride or hike better in one direction. And so you would, maybe for the purpose of just explaining this, you would start from the upper star, make your way past the trailhead, and then descend down to the lower star. There's a little boxed in area there which represents a archaeological site. The Forest Service have already done a study on that area several years ago. So we wouldn't be able to build a trail in that area, but we would be able to use the existing roadways that go through there just for access. And where the two roads come together, right here, you would be able to have that be sort of the access point for the system. The way that we would like to put these trails in is using a trail builder who is currently, actually he's out of town at the moment because he's employed full-time building trail for people privately. Doug Hilo is his name, and he is currently working for a private company that go out and put trail system onto people's properties. People in California who say, I have 3 or 4 acres, build me as many miles of trail as you can fit. His technique for building trail is pretty fantastic in that he is constantly looking at the ground and deciding on the route that the trail is going to go as he does it moment to moment. So while we have actually mapped in a trail system on here, it's really just an example of what could go there, because as he starts building, he basically just makes his decisions on where the trail is going to go as he's building it. He uses a lot of features, so trees, rocks, which there are quite a few of out there on that particular lot. He would be using those in a way to sort of hide the fact that the trail kind of almost overlaps itself. And while it doesn't, you would never really get a look at the fact that you've got quite a lot of trail packed into a small area. This is a very sort of popular modern way to put trail systems in, where you take the land that you have and you put as much trail in as you possibly can to sort of make it as good a use of the area as possible. The side slope on this area would mean that the trail will be able to naturally have a lot of drainage built in, so while it will still require maintenance, it might not require as much maintenance long term as some of the trail systems that we have, which are currently point to point, which often just go straight up the side of hills and again end up with that water chute characteristic. I would love to answer any questions that you have on this, specifically what long-term what the cycling group would be proposing would be that the group fund the building of this system, and that the county allow us permission to A, put the trails on, and B, we could work together hopefully to create some sort of a long-term plan that would make it so that, let's say, if the group did fund it, it didn't get sold for development within a year or two. The hope would be that if we're able to put the money forward and employ the trail builder to put this stuff in properly, that we could get 10, 12, I don't know how many years would be acceptable to ask for, but long term to be able to know that that would remain as a potential trail system. So yeah, I'm open to questions.
Any questions, Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Pearson, thank you for your presentation.
But
the flip side of the sort of guarantee of not developing it is a need to maintain it.
Right.
And you didn't mention that specifically. It would be the bike group's commitment to maintain it as well for however long it were being used?
Absolutely. One of the things that would make this area simple to maintain is the fact that it is spread over such a small area. Using the trail work that we did up in Signal Peak last month as an example, some of the worst sections that needed the most work were very difficult to get to. And let's say you took a group out there for 4 hours, you might spend an hour driving and hiking into where you need to work, which is just sort of a waste of time. So there's a really neat opportunity to be able to get in there and manage this area with maintenance because of how accessible it is. We wouldn't be looking to get rid of the 2 existing roadways. The trail would kind of cross those, so there'd be lots of simple ways to be able to get in and access sections that may be rutted out or required a little bit of opening or cleaning. But the cycling group has the manpower and the desire to be able to get in and do this. It's something that we've really sort of tried to take on all of the trail systems that we ride and hike, given that there isn't a lot of funding or bodies available to do that kind of work.
In form does this agreement take? This might be a question for Misha or Charlene. Is it a public-private partnership, or is it something less formal?
I'm envisioning something similar to that, and so as Misha has briefed me on this, I've been somewhat exploring in my mind as to how this agreement would look and how we would, put those covenants in there that we would not sell the property off contingent upon maintenance, etc. So I really don't know what that is at this point, but I am hopeful.
We currently have volunteer agreements with the Forest Service that allow us to do a certain amount of work in a certain kind of overseen environment. And currently we're working with the Heart of the Hilo, who's working with the Forest Service to try and create a stewardship program where people who go and receive adequate training in trail work are able to adopt sections, and then with the knowledge that they gain during those work sessions, they're able to then run their own trail day. They provide a safety briefing at the beginning of the day. They fill out waivers to give those to people to sort of move any liability away from potential incidents, and then guide the trail work in a way that would make it so that it's within standards set by, in this situation, the Forest Service. So making sure that trees are cut back in a certain way, making sure that the ground is left in a certain way. And so that's currently an education piece that is being worked on, and I really hope that that's able to come to life, because there is excitement and interest from our group members in being able to get out and do a little bit more work, but we won't overstep any bounds. If we don't have permission to do that, then we won't. And so I imagine that the timing of these 2 things is quite good, because if we're able to get that program through the Forest Service, it would be something we could come up as an agreement with the county as well.
Go ahead. So, Martin, thank you very much for doing this. In my role as Healthy Kids, Healthy Communities Coordinator for Grant County, I've been having a lot of conversation with Martin and other folks around trail stuff, and I just want to say that I really, really appreciate you and all the people that you're working with, your vision around this, and for taking the initiative to bring it to the commissioners and to have a plan when you're brought here. So thank you very much for doing that. As I recall, this trail could also be used by cross-country teams, is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
So I'm remembering that you and I had a little bit of conversation about potentially involving both districts in some of the trails maintenance as well with the cross-country groups and that sort of stuff, right?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, Commissioner Edwards. Currently, the Silver City or Silver High cross-country team did do maintenance out there before their recent meet, and they have the intention of adopting the trail that's on the forest. They have not come to the county yet to talk about that, although they did some work on it. They did eliminate the Puke Hill, as we talked about. It was in such bad shape. And just some history on this. That whole cross-country system, including what was done on the forest, and I got this history from Bob Shiwitz, it was put in by county. So this was years ago. The county staff actually put that system in with the Cobre high coaches. It was their input, and back to what Martin said, not a lot of thought in drainage was put into that. So it's not the county's fault for that. They just went with what the coaches asked them to put in. So we're just trying to repair some of that. But yes, they would be very interested in helping to maintain any trail systems that go in there. I think what Martin drew on here, somewhere around almost 3 miles of trail that was put in, and of course Doug has some vision of getting even more than that in it. The cross-country team has to be between 2.8 and 3.2 miles, I believe, for a meet. So.
Yeah, actually. And I did go out there with Doug Hewlett, and we took a look at the area. And generally, when he's building trail privately, he goes off the sort of equation of being able to get in a mile for every 10 acres. That is really packed, though. And we may find, down in the bottom left-hand sort of square of the designated area, one of the reasons that the trail doesn't actually go into there, you'll all know as you're driving, you come past the armory there, and you kind of start going down the hill to the spot where the cops like to hide. If you go in through that gate there, that area is really sandy. And it could be that as much as it would be nice to fill this entire area with trail, that's not going to be realistic. And so certainly down in that drainage, if we could get anything through there, great, but we've got to look at the land that we've got to work with. And if you move up and away onto that hillside, the ground becomes a lot firmer, and there's a lot of existing, like I say, trees, rocks, things that could be used to incorporate flow into the trail that would also act as drainage.
So the other comment that I would just make is that the trail building that Doug Hewlett has done with the town of Silver City and volunteers on Boston Hill is fantastic. His work is really, really, really great, and this would be a huge asset for our community and a great addition to all the different kinds of things that we're thinking about with Baton Park and Fort Barrett. So great job.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if I can add one more point, I sort of became more involved in this when I took over Signal Peak back in sort of 2014, and I was left with quite a mess to deal with, because at that time there had been a downhill bike community that had taken it upon himself to do modifications to trail without permission, and then generally not respected their special use permits for the events that they pulled from the Forest Service. And I know it's difficult sometimes when you think of mountain bikers and mountain biking trail, not to just sort of imagine people flipping and doing, flying through the air and stuff. That's not really the goal here. There's a specific kind of trail that moves and flows that is still multi-use, but it takes into account bikes as well. So the climbs stay below a certain grade of percent rise. The corners are put in a way that isn't too sharp for a bike to steer. And while I do respect the Forest Service does have a lot of mileage of trail to manage, the reality of it is that if you're a young family, if you're a child, or if you're new to mountain biking, you run out of areas to ride here quick. And again, I'm very grateful for all the areas that we do have to ride, but with 10, soon to be 11-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, I'm lucky that they enjoy riding, and I'm lucky that they're getting better at it all the time. But the reality is that there really only are a few areas right now that are what I would define as family friendly. And so the goal here would be to have something that's fun for all levels and abilities.
Misha, let me ask you a question. You know how passionate I am about Baton Park and economic development, outdoor activities, and Grant County is so diverse in some of these, a lot of sports, outdoor, indoor sports. Seeing what I have envisioned and what eventually I would like at Baton Park Cultural Center, we have such a great community here, art, etc., soccer, fields. That trail system, would that impede in any way for any type of development, maybe football field, soccer field, something for kids, rec center, anything like that in the future?
Thank you, Chairman. We did a map, I had Daniel do a separate map that is not here, but I can present it to you, to all of you, where we took into consideration a couple of those ideas that you had given to me, and we placed them on the existing land also prior to having Martin go out there and look at it. And one of the things that already exists out there is what was called the outdoor classroom or education point, which Martin found when he was out there, and that is very close to that top triangle. Kind of Martin's vision is that it kind of goes in and out of that area there without disturbing that. So that's one that's already there. We did look at the track with soccer field, just like what you requested, and so I can produce that map that shows all of this with those overlays on it, if you'd like, as a commission.
Yeah, because eventually, I mean, I think, you know, and I'm not opposed to this. I just don't want, without learning and seeing everything, I really don't want to commit to anything until I see that, because, I mean, like I've said, and I guess I'm repeating myself, you know, here in Grand County, there's a lot of diverse sports, economic. You know, Baton Park's a great place, not only for mining district, but for the silver area and bringing in this economic development stuff. So, you know, we said, you know, like one of the comments that was made about, you know, putting it in and then building over it. You know, that's a last thing I want to do, but I want to make sure that, you know, this is a great idea, but that we don't, you know, step on any toes, I guess.
Yeah, and that is a great point. I didn't actually realize this when I went out there with Doug. He was trying to explain to me that the hardest land to build on is flat, because how do you get the water off flat areas and flat trail, and also how much land do you cut out without making a groove? And so there are parts of the land out there that have a nice side slope to them, and then there are parts that are flatter. And so being able to go out there and sort of really identify those would be quite easy. There's certainly going to be some stuff that's more desirable for the trail, and then there's going to be some stuff that we could leave as well for future development. So it would be, I don't think it would be difficult. I think it would be wise to sort of incorporate those ideas into it too.
I'd like to, I'm not going to hash this out here today, I mean, but I'd like to meet with you, I guess, and walk in there and try to get a better look at what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a great idea. Don't take me wrong. I need to really visualize it, I guess.
Absolutely.
Other than on paper.
No, and it helped me out going out there too, so I'll be more than available to go out and do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just one more follow-up. So, Misha, in your response to the chair, you didn't actually say whether or not there was room for all those things. You just said there was an overlay.
So what we put in, which there is room for, is a track. I had Daniel look at the size of the Silver High track that's there at that box field, and he took that and overlaid it on top. And that would allow a track around with the field in the center that could be utilized for soccer and or football, so there was room for that. And then the other option that the chairman asked me to look at was an RV park, which we did do an overlay of that. We took into considerations, I think it was about 15 sites. I'd have to look at that again, but I have that overlay, and I can show you where that is.
So just to clarify, doesn't the plan for Fort Bear, the stuff that Santa Clara is working on, there is an RV park in that, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And so the RV park you're referring to is something in addition to what Fort Bear is thinking about?
We just, we wanted to make sure, because the Silver Shoe Cycling Group does not want to put trails in and also have them destroyed because of development. So we just put it in there at the request of the chairman when I had that initial discussion. I've had discussions with all of you guys at one point or another on this. So
the purpose for that was because if you see when they bring in sometimes softball tournaments or different events, there's always people camping out in that cement area, just giving them an option, and probably anywhere between 10 to 15 places to do that instead of camping out there sometimes.
So, yeah, I just was trying to clarify if there was already plans for that with Santa Clara, did we need to do more or what? So I also am very visual and would want to see all that on a map.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Moving on to item G, comment regarding wild and scenic rivers legislation, Hilo National Forest, Adam Mendoza.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thanks for giving me a little time today. So I know you started your morning off with lots of comments, so I'm not going to tell you whether you should or shouldn't approve the resolution, but what I did want to do is come here and have a little additional communication. So if you look at Wild and Scenic River, there's two efforts underway. So you've got what the Forest Service is currently doing, and then you've got what the environmental community is currently doing, and they're not one and the same, and they don't align exactly. So I just wanted to provide a little information on how they're different, some of the facts around it, which maybe help you all make your decision. So just really quick, the Forest Service is undergoing a Wild and Scenic River eligibility study, and it is part of our forest plan revision. That is a requirement of the 2012 planning rule. So on the Forest Service side, we have spent about 2 years now, 2.5 years, involved with public meetings and analysis to look at the different elements of forest plan revision, one of which is Wild and Scenic River. In addition, or I guess paralleling that, is this other effort, which was the conversation that you all are having about the resolution. They're very different as far as the way those processes work. So our process is really driven by public engagement and trying to evaluate stretches of river to see if they have values that make them remarkably outstanding. Same law, but how we approach it is different. So that's the piece I really just wanted to talk to you a little bit about and make sure it's clear. So I feel like the Forest Service did a pretty extensive effort when it comes to our Wild and Scenic River inventory and evaluation. I'll tell you right up front, as part of Forest Plan revision process, we will not make any recommendations to Congress for designation of wild and scenic rivers. Legally, I have to make recommendations. It can be 0 acres, but I have to make recommendations for wilderness. I don't have that same requirement for wild and scenic. So I'll just tell you right up front, my decision not to make those recommendations, here's why. Currently, our management is structured in a way that has resulted in those remarkably outstanding qualities that are out there actually being out there. So we have managed this landscape in a way that has resulted in those stretches being eligible to begin with. We will continue to try to manage in a way that continues to preserve those remarkably outstanding characteristics. So I don't think at this time, through Forest Plan revision, I need to make any recommendations for wilderness. So that's the first piece of why we're doing what we're doing.
For wilderness?
For wild and scenic, I'm sorry, thank you. So that's just the first piece to understand. We are doing this inventory and analysis, but we will not go any further for recommendations. What it leads me to is I have seen and compared our inventory and analysis versus the proposal that is in front of you all, and they do not match. Now, I can't show you ours quite yet, but we're getting real close. I have to go brief our Washington office and the Department of Agriculture before we release, and so right now we're scheduled to release our stuff in January. And so when we release our information, it will include all of the analysis we did, which is how we got to those reaches that we feel would qualify for potential recommendations. But again, I can tell you the difference between where we have gotten and where this proposal stands are different. There's different reaches. The proposal in front of you all has a lot more miles proposed than what we have in our inventory and analysis. When I looked at wild and scenic rivers to see what was eligible for potential designation, I really felt like they should be special in some way. I would go with, if everything's special, nothing's special. And we got some really remarkable landscapes on the Hilo. We managed some very, very important landscapes. So I didn't want to reduce if we were going to recommend something, what that would look like. And so there are specific criteria you go through the wild and scenic inventory and analysis process, and we really set a high bar. I will tell you the difference in where we set the bar really probably is the difference between these two proposals. That is why we have less miles in our inventory and evaluation than what is currently before you. So there are stretches out there that we feel as the Forest Service potentially would be good candidates for recommendation. But again, it's fewer miles. So what I would encourage, if you haven't had the opportunity to sit with the groups who have developed the proposal that's before you and understand exactly each piece of the criteria that they put forward to develop this proposal, I would really encourage that. And again, if you're able to, and I'm not recommending in any direction, but if you're able to wait until January, you'll actually be able to compare theirs to ours, which has a large public involvement piece to it. What I will say in our inventory and evaluation, this comes back to the Forest Service's approach to this, is there's 3 designations for wild and scenic: recreation, wild, and scenic. And they have different criteria and different management responsibilities depending on how you recognize those. If you inventory and assign the right designation to a stretch, that designation should not impact the current uses. So I will just use a couple of examples. We do a lot of work with the Gila trout on the Gila National Forest. There are different strains of the Gila trout. There are some of those strains that are more important than others. When we look at rivers, we would recognize those stretches that have those rare strains as more important than just a general Gila trout. We then look at what's the recreational opportunities around those Gila trout. Again, another important component. If we classify stretches correctly, if we've got important lineage of Gila trout and you're able to fish them, you should still be able to fish them when it's all said and done. That should not change. On the contrast, if you take something like Arizona Water Settlement Act, if we know there is a project like that is potentially going to occur, that stretch shouldn't be designated. And it's one of the things that makes this very controversial. There's different desires within the community or outside the community that potentially a designation would stop that. If we're doing this and we're truly inventorying this the way I feel we should, you classify that correctly, you shouldn't have those impacts. So that reach probably shouldn't be eligible. That was the approach we took when we walked through each step of our analysis. So again, less miles, and that's where we set that bar, and that's where you'll see that. What I will say is that while if you designate correctly for the current uses, that does not account for future uses. And so if you designate a stretch wild or scenic, because today's uses are compatible with that, and 5 years from now you want to go put a diversion on it, you may have an issue. So you really want to think about not only today's activities on those reaches, but what are the future activities? And again, that's how we tried to approach that on the Forest Service side. So our analysis incorporates what we believe will happen based on our forest plan direction. As far as some of the other issues we run into, things like grazing, which can be a hot topic, at least from a Forest Service stance, we don't and have not used wild and scenic to remove cows. But please note, we get sued for lots of different things, and that can be a point of contention. So we have a notice of intent to be sued. The timeline is Friday for our response. If we don't respond in a way that appeases the folks who filed suit, then we'll be in a lawsuit, which is over grazing on the Gila. And it is over riparian areas on the Gila. So just know that we have not used that as a mechanism for removing cows, but we can be sued for lots of things, and that is one of many that folks will use. So just something to consider. I bring it up because it does still play into how we did our inventory and analysis. So it's another important component of that is considered. So as we look at where we sit versus where this sits, I don't know how the timing's going to work out. We're on a timeline from the Forest Service standpoint that is dictated by our funding and our Washington office. But again, I know we will release our documents in January. And so it may be an opportunity for you all to take another look and have additional information around how wild and scenic inventory analysis has been done in this area on the exact forest that you have before you. So I just wanted to present that information, give you some stuff to consider, give you an idea of how the Forest Service ran our analysis process. Because again, they don't align, and one of the things I'm most concerned with is how we communicate with citizens in this community over these different efforts, because they can be very confusing, and if folks aren't aware of how they're done, they may or may not know how they should stay involved with this. On the proposal in front of you now, Forest Service is not involved. We have met with the congressional staffers and the environmental community, so we understand what they're doing, but they do not have to include us or make changes based on what we say. If Congress acts on the proposal, we will simply do whatever Congress tells us, because that's who we work for. So just know that's my greatest concern, is how we communicate with folks and make sure they're aware of what's going on. With that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions or other items that I can help clarify.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Thank you for that.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I was a little curious why you're not, what was behind the decision not to make a recommendation, which I understand is a tentative decision at this point since things aren't final. You mentioned a very careful process to identify certain stretches. These stretches are have fewer miles than the citizens' proposal that we're looking at. But I never heard a rationale, I don't think, for not recommending it. The one thing that came close to rationale was our management so far has been fine, so we don't need anything else.
So two parts to it. So you're correct. That's the first, is our current management. So when we started doing the inventory and evaluation, there was an inventory and evaluation done in the early 2000s. So this is not something new. We do this every so often. And really, when we do it, it's driven by some type of congressional requirement. So we're told, you will go do this, and here's how you will do it. So we did an inventory and evaluation in the early 2000s. We started this inventory and evaluation comparing what was done then to what we think now. We actually found that inventory and evaluation was pretty good. We did have some changes that had occurred, which resulted in us changing some of the reaches that we had identified as potentially eligible. One example, if you look at the fire that burned near Willow Creek, prior to that fire, that stretch of river in Willow Creek had different species of fish. Post-fire, it killed the fire ash flow killed all the fish, so they put in a fish barrier, and now from the barrier up through Willow Creek's, the residents there are Gila trout. And so now it's one of the easiest, or few locations, I should say, to get to for fishing Gila trout. It's not necessarily easy, but you can drive to it. You can't drive to most stretches where you're gonna fish Gila trout. So with that as an example, what we found is our inventory analysis was really pretty good. We hadn't seen a lot of change except for where we had one or two major events. The current management that we've been under has resulted in the continued management of those reaches, which have continued to maintain their integrity. So that's where I get to, we didn't feel like we had management that was taking us in a direction that was deterring from these reaches maintaining those important qualities. So that was the first. The second was just going back to the timing of the Arizona Water Settlement Act. So this was a decision that I made as the forest supervisor. A lot of controversy around Arizona Water Settlement Act. When we started the analysis, weren't sure what that was going to look like around those reaches. And so we made the decision early that we would do the required parts, which is for us within the 2012 planning rule, but we would stop at the moment when we had completed the required parts, and that was just my decision. So those are the two things, full disclosure. The first part is a much greater influence on my decision that should we actually designate or not, or I should say make recommendations. Only Congress designates. The second part was a contributing factor, though.
All right. So if you'll indulge me, I guess I have a reaction to both of the parts. To me, the fact that what we've been doing has been working is not a reason not to designate. In fact, in some ways, it's a reason to designate. That's how I would interpret it. What we've been doing is great. We all love the result of it. So let's make sure by designating that we continue to manage it that way. You indicated an optimism that we would continue to manage it that way without the designation. My perspective is that optimism is actually justified if we designate. And if we don't, it's uncertain. We could get a new forest supervisor who feels differently. Do you have a response to that?
No, I don't disagree that you can get a new supervisor at any moment.
Okay, I'm not suggesting we want one. All right, well, so for me, that's a reason to designate, and I guess we can disagree about that. And item 2 may have been a reason 10 years ago, but I don't see how it is a reason now. Nobody is considering proposing a diversion on Forest Service land. And all of the stretches you've identified as potentially suitable for recommendation, presumably, are on Forest Service land. So I don't see the connection, and at the very worst, you might have to stop a mile upstream from where a diversion might happen.
Yes, so you are correct. Everything that we look at is on Forest Service administered lands, no private at all. So when I got here in 2015, that conversation around Arizona Water Settlement Act was very different than it stands today. And so at least the conversations we were having as an agency with Bureau of Reclamation didn't exclude stuff on Forest Service lands at that time.
But it's been a while that it has.
It has been. So that's where we made this decision. We started Forest Plan Revision in 2015. And this was one of the decisions made right when we started. So as we set the course for what we're going to do to get through the process, we made decisions on where would we go with each one of these pieces. So you are correct. Those conversations have changed a lot over the course of 4 years for Arizona Water Settlement Act stuff. But at the moment when we started revision, it was just in a different spot.
Yeah, and there's some reason that I'm not understanding that you can't change that decision, 3 years later.
Right now, if we looked at our timelines overall, we'd be hard pressed to finish the analysis to change the decision not to, yes. So a couple of points, just side notes to your point. So we get funded 4 years to finish Forest Plan Revision, and it's at the tune of about $600,000. So it's enough money I can't just absorb it. There has yet to be a forest in the nation do it in 4 years. We're going to come as close on the Hilo as anyone has, and I think we're on about the 4.5-year timeline. To make adjustments once you get in is almost impossible.
I really appreciate that institutional explanation. That's actually quite helpful. I want to say I really appreciated your idea that if everything's special, nothing's special. Sometimes I say that about our students. But it invites the question, special compared to what? And so I'm curious if when you were applying that criterion, you were saying, is this special within the context of the Gila National Forest? Or were you saying, is this special within the context of New Mexico or the western U.S.? Because I think you'd get different results.
So I agree with you entirely. A couple different things we looked at. So we stayed with, is it special when you look at the Gila?
Right.
And to add a little bit more to that, there's multiple criteria you look at when you look at a stretch. So does it have things like threatened and endangered species? Does it have recreational opportunities? Is it free-flowing? What's the habitat? I mean, there's a bunch of criteria if you actually get into wild and scenic that you look at. So not only did we look at the Gila, but we also looked at, within the Gila, how many of the criteria does this stretch actually check off? So as an example, if we had one threatened and endangered species in a reach, we didn't consider it special because we have stretches of river that have 5 and 6 and 7 threatened and endangered species in them. And so we set a threshold that said you got to have a couple of species before this for threatened and endangered species is something that would be remarkable compared to everything else we have on the Gila. So not only did we look Gila specific, but we got even more specific and said this has got to rise to a higher level than just AT&E on the Gila, because We have hundreds of miles of that.
Right, that's all obviously helps me formulate a position. I think in my mind, you could end up labeling every stretch of the Hilo within the forest as special, because I'm comparing it to the Hilo outside the forest, the Hilo where there's just sand, the Rio Grande, right? All sorts of examples of really non-special places. So different comparison. And maybe you can't tell us this until January, but how many fewer miles are we talking about?
Okay, I'm going to make an estimate on numbers, which I won't get right. I think the current proposal before you has about 440 miles,
that's right.
somewhere thereabouts. I think our proposal has closer to 150.
Oh, so it's dramatically fewer.
Different. Yes,
That's
sir.
what I needed to know.
Yes, sir.
My last is not related to Wild and Scenic necessarily, but you mentioned the lawsuit that you've gotten a notice of intent about.
Yes, sir.
My understanding that is that is a result of a group's opinion that you're not enforcing the rules around the allotments that have been leased.
So it's two pieces. I'll clarify really quickly. You are correct. We got within the lawsuit allegations that we were not enforcing exclosure fences to our riparian areas correctly. In addition, though, they identified that they felt on a number of allotments we didn't have biological opinions from Fish and Wildlife Service, who is the agency responsible for management of threatened and endangered species. So before we take any action in the Forest Service, we get an opinion from them to what our actions will mean for threatened and endangered species. They said we had a number of allotments that did not have those opinions provided. So two separate issues that we're trying to address.
Thanks. And I wasn't aware of the second. I was aware of the first because some of the cows involved actually have been on my property, and I've identified them.
It is, and there's one other part to it we'll have to tease out. So within that NOI, they also linked in feral cattle, which is not a permitted deal, but a major issue for the Gila right now. And so that's one other element we're trying to tease out, and we've been trying to address this for 20 plus years. So.
Excellent. I'm glad you brought that up. I think all of these, again, in my mind, they do not represent a threat to a use as long as the use is being done correctly. So if we designate stretches as wild and scenic, if we're managing the allotments properly, I don't believe there's conflict. I understand that the potential for conflict exists, potential for lawsuits exist, but when those lawsuits are for failure to manage according to a plan, to me that isn't, that's a reasonable reason for a lawsuit. It doesn't mean that the uses are conflicting. Thank you for letting me be on my soapbox.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Edward?
I have a clarifying question. I think what I heard you say is that the process of forest plan revision and the funding and the timelines and all that are so big and so bureaucratic that even though circumstances may have changed that would influence the decisions made, we're so far down the road that we can't afford to relook at that. Is that what I heard you say?
Somewhat. So if you look specific to forest plan revision and actually making the decision, will we make any recommendations at the end for potential designation of wild and scenic? Then yes, to your question. Now, the reason I say somewhat is because we started the process where we had the ability to decide, do we make recommendations at the end or not? And so we made a decision early, and that's specifically the decision that's tough to go back on.
Yeah. Okay, so that was what I thought I heard you say. So, I'm really struck by the fact that we're trying to make these decisions within the parameters of these bureaucracies that are so enormous that there's just no room for reevaluating changing circumstances. And it's just a challenge.
So I agree with you. It's one of the things that makes the job very difficult. It's one of the reasons I look at the communication piece as we talk about this. understand there's about 3, maybe 4 ways you can get wild and scenic rivers designated. The 2 most common are through forest plan revision, like we're doing, or through some kind of congressional action like is before you. There's a couple other ways, and I couldn't even describe them to you. There's a way where the governor can get with the secretary for Department of Interior and they can agree on stuff, and we don't do that, so I'm not real familiar with it. But the reason I bring this up is because outside of forest plan revision, the most common way is the congressional piece. When that occurs, whatever is decided by Congress will come to us as an agency and we will manage that way. And so when I look at it, our processes are governed by a couple of things that are tough, like budgets. But these other processes aren't necessarily governed by the exact same processes. And so, again, you have a proposal before you that won't be subject to the same things that ours are. And that is the piece with communication. Make sure folks know the difference, know how to engage. Those kind of things I think is really important, because it's that opportunity for folks to engage as citizens and influence this where it's maybe not as restrictive as some of the things we go through as an agency.
So I have a final question, and that is, how long is the average tenure of a forest supervisor on a specific forest?
I will take a guess about 5 years. And I've been here 4.5.
Now, I'm not suggesting that we want to fire you or we wish for you to move, but I am thinking about that in the context of you have a particular way of managing the forest that the next person may not. And that is also another piece of this whole decision process that I find to be very challenging to work with. So, thanks.
Commissioner Bill? Yeah. Excuse me. Haven't used my voice today. So you talked about managing the forest and protecting basically what is special and wild and scenic. How would wild and scenic designation change your ability to manage the forest?
So just really trying to frame it up so folks understand, if we designate it correctly, it shouldn't change our current management. It's the future management piece that is the one that's uncertain and could definitely be affected. So when I say that, as an example, we designated as many reaches as recreational as we did wild or scenic. And so when you recognize, or that's our analysis shows. So and so when you recognize how that stretch of river is being used right now, if we were to move forward with recommendations and they were designated, as long as they followed that, I don't see any changes. Now, 2 parts to that. Future proposals, though, we might not be able to manage the same way. And so if you look at economic development, in my mind, you've got folks who are trying to do different stuff. They will use the reaches differently. Those future endeavors, we may say no to because of that. The other thing to note is that if something is designated other than the way we identified it, it could have impacts to our current management. So if we've identified a stretch as recreational and it actually gets designated as wild or scenic, that might have an impact to our current management. So it's one of the reasons you got to go just stretch by stretch on each one of these bodies of water and make sure that you understand what's going on there and why it's important. And there are reasons to have designations for wild and scenic. I don't want to make it sound by any means like it doesn't have a place. There's really important reasons. I'll give you an example. I came from Colorado. There were people in Colorado who made their living doing whitewater rafting. A designation of recreational for wild and scenic will reduce the probability you're going to have a diversion or some kind of dam or something on that river. It can mean it maintains the livelihood of a community because the community is based around that recreational opportunity. These things make a lot of sense when they're used and they align with the use that you have. So that's one of the reasons I really took the time when we did it on the Forest Service side to make sure we looked at each stretch and tried to make sure we understood what was going on there and maintain those special qualities. Because if we do that appropriately, the management that's happening right now shouldn't be impacted, and the future management should be in alignment with where we want to see things go. But again, it's got to be designated in alignment with that, or it can impact our ability to manage both current and future. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. That's all I have.
That's all you have, Commissioner?
What's the difference between recreational and wild and scenic?
So the three different levels have different management responses. So the remarkably outstanding qualities that make up each one of those are different. And so it's like a tiered system. Recreation is the lowest tier of the three designations. So you've got more management flexibility. You're recognizing as a recreational stretch, people are using that in some way. For the Hilo, most stretches that are recreational have to do with fishing. It's directly tied to the river itself. We also have stretches that are tied to rafting or floating the river. If you go into then wild and scenic is the middle, wild is the top tier there. And so when you look at impacts, what you allow along those reaches can change. So my example for scenic, as an example, I lived in Wyoming. I worked for the Forest Service up there. We had a stretch designated as scenic. The county at the time I worked with wanted to put in a gravel pit, and they happened to locate it within or close to a scenic stretch, and we wouldn't put it in because it detoured from the scenic value that had made that stretch scenic itself. Now, had you made it recreational, you may have put that gravel pit in, because were you impacting the qualities that was designated for? And if it was fishing and a gravel pit didn't impact fishing, you could still put the gravel pit in, you'd still have a section designated as recreational. So it's just three tiers. Each tier has a little bit higher requirements for how we manage that, and it's really looking at the qualities that make up that stretch. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to the next item, review of September 12, 2019 regular meeting agenda. Ms. Webb.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. First item of action on your agenda under presentations is item A, consideration of proclamation proclaiming September 11th, 2019 as Patriot Day and National Day of Service and Remembrance. Commissioner Billings, do you want to discuss that?
Yeah, thank you. A group approached me with with a request that the commission do this. Unfortunately, we couldn't have it on to be timely on today's agenda for the designation, which would be tomorrow. Nevertheless, even one day retroactively, if we pass it on Thursday, I think would be acceptable. You've seen the proclamation, I guess, but while you're looking for it, basically this comes from bipartisan legislation after 9/11 to designate September 11th of every year as Patriot Day and a National Day of Service. It's been supported by each administration since then. I have the 2013 proclamation from President Obama here, and quite a bit of the language is in the proclamation that's being proposed is in his letter, which I'm guessing has been used by several presidents down through the years. So.
Is there an added benefit to a county adopting this when the feds are already adopting it?
They're going to have a small service down at Golf Park tomorrow, and they wanted to read a current proclamation, which they're not going to have because we can't pass it till Thursday. But I'd like to go ahead and pass this on Thursday. I suggested that they go ahead and read the proclamation, but not say that it's passed by Grant County Commission. Unfortunately, next year, if we do that, I'll ask them to bring it to us in August.
So, I'm sorry, were you done?
Go ahead.
So that was going to be my clarifying thing. If their celebration is tomorrow and we pass it on Thursday, kind of leaves them in a pickle on this. So can we agree that between us, without voting on it, that it's okay with us for them to read it without saying it's passed? Is that allowable?
We can each individually say how we feel about it.
Yeah, I'd like to know how, if anyone's opposed to this, I'd like to.
The same thing,
That's
right?
kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that offer. Thank you.
I don't have a problem with them reading it as, and then they say that, it'll be up for the regular meeting on Thursday. Do you?
I would like a chance to read it really quick.
Okay. You brought it up, so I thought I'd answer
I would be fine for them to read it.
I would like to think that our first responders would have acted in a similar way, no matter whose lives were at stake. This resolution focuses on sacrifice for our country. I think these were ultimate sacrifices for humanity, frankly. So I have a small quibble with Patriot Day as being too small of a phrase. I actually love the phrase National Day of Service and Remembrance. I think that that's what's going on. People are serving their fellow human beings. But that's a small quibble, and I have no problem with this.
Okay, thank you. Okay. If you've seen something in the maybe from the Chamber of Commerce that says the County Commission has already passed that, because that's what I saw yesterday. That was not my doing. I just want you to, and I don't think it was Scott Terry's doing or the Chambers. I think he got somebody jumped the gun and gave him that information, and he just passed it along. I haven't addressed it with him yet, so. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff happens all the time, so there's no worries.
So just to clarify, we're all in agreement that we're okay for them to read it without saying it passed.
Exactly, yes, thank you.
Now we're ready for that.
Now we're ready.
Moving on to new business, item D, consideration of Corey Camino's fiscal year 2020 budget. That has been in notice for your review. I will make sure that Kim is here on Thursday to present that to you. Item E, consideration of Lodgers Tax Advisory Board applicant. We finally had one applicant, Mr. Bruce McKinney. He owns a couple of vacation rentals on Highway 15, so he qualifies under the tourism sector for the Lodgers Tax Board.
Not to prolong the meeting, but I have a question about that. So at the Lodgers Tax meeting, let's see, what is this board, sorry?
Lodgers Tax Advisory Board?
Yeah, so at the advisory board meeting I attended, there was a complaint there by some of them that some of these smaller bread and breakfast facilities don't pay lodgers tax. Are you familiar with that? Or?
Yes, that's been an ongoing issue. We do our best to enforce the ordinance and do our best to send them letters, visit them, encourage them to, but there's really the enforcement part of that is somewhat difficult.
So isn't it something about if you're less than two units, you're exempt or you're not? There's a different standard.
Tax, right? So, but that is there's language that also changed in the legislature that governs that a little bit differently too, around occupancy tax.
I need to get updated on that then, thank you.
There's two different types of things that they pay. So there's a portion that they pay to the county under lodger's tax, and then there's occupancy tax, which is the two, or that talks about two different rooms. There were several pieces of legislation. There's some that willingly pay it, some that don't. It's probably need to have Becky come and make a presentation to you to explain all of the different pieces, because I'm not as educated about it as I should be.
Okay.
But I know that there was a piece of legislation that changed that. But I do know enforcement is definitely an issue for us.
Who's responsible?
Gilbert.
Okay.
Because he's our code enforcement officer. So the board is simply an advisory board, so it's not their job to go out and enforce people, although Becky does a very good job volunteering to she does a lot of outreach to folks that don't pay. So, we're very fortunate to have her in that capacity, but it's not their job to do, it's ours.
Well, in my limited memory, it's been a couple of years. The problem comes where you have a facility who's paying a significant amount of money, and then they're in competition with someone who doesn't have to, and that might just be the profit margin, and that was the concern.
I will ask her to come and make a presentation at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to agreements. Item F, consideration of Agreement A 1939 between the County of Grant and Hidalgo Medical Services to collect and analyze detention center data regarding behavioral health services. I initially told the chairman I wanted to table this. However, we've worked through that via email this morning. I will have these. There was some language that the attorneys wanted to modify around indemnification. So at this time, I don't want to table it. What this is an agreement with HMS to do the data collection part of the Freeport grant that we received around the Stepping Up initiative, and it's to collect and provide some analysis of behavioral health services and data in the detention center. So it doesn't cost us anything because I'll use this data aligns with our intervention project. And I will use those funds to make the match for this Freeport grant, which you have to have. We identified a county match and Freeport grant. So this is not costing us anything. It's just an agreement I have to have in place that is asking them to collect this, which Dan's already agreed to. This is just a formality.
I'm confused about what indemnification could be involved in collecting data.
Well, it's just something that and our previous county attorney wanted it in all of the agreements, and I drafted this one and left it out. And so it's just a simple liability issue that they typically want in all agreements. That's an attorney question. It's the typical language that Abby used that he provided this morning. I don't see it being an issue with HMS.
I'm with you, though. I probably left it out too.
I wasn't thinking of that around that service, but that's what we pay them for. Next item G, consideration of agreement A 1940, lease agreement with Will Scott for temporary terminal building at the Grant County Airport. For the terminal renovation, we have to have a location to relocate advanced air and services that are in the terminal. So this is an agreement to lease the building so that we don't have them operating out on the front steps. It's part of the terminal renovation project, and it's included in that budget.
Okay, so that was my first question.
Yes.
And then the second thing is, this is a metal building that they're going to come and set up. It looks like they're going to come and set it up, and they're going to take care of all the
what it is,
tie downs, blah, 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 and then they'll come and pick it all up when it's done?
Yes, so it's a temporary office building, very similar to what you see as like portable buildings for schools. That's what it's going to look like.
Okay. And so then if the construction runs over, we'll have to see this again after. So if we need it for 7 months, it looks like, and if we're behind on construction, then this will come in front of us again?
Yes. However, we think that we have done the agreement longer than what the anticipated construction time is. We've tried to give us some cushion so that we didn't run into that issue.
Thank you.
Is this building going to have power?
Yes.
Yep.
So we have to, that's part of, we have to, yes, place temporary power, that's a cost on us, which is also, when we look at a total project cost, these are things that we've already identified. This is just simply space to relocate advanced air so that we can continue to run terminal operations during renovation.
Right.
So that's a separate cost that's been
For us, that was as much as moving the darn portable, installing the power.
Next, item H, consideration of agreement A1941 between Sapphire Health LLC and Grant County. I also initially requested this be tabled, and I'm taking that back. Cleaned up that indemnification language as well. What this is to provide electronic health records for our detention center. It's based on a per inmate cost, very similar to any other contract that we utilize at the detention center. And so this is so that we have electronic health records that actually become our property, not some issues that we've run into in the past where the contractor leaves and they take the files with them, and getting those back for later purposes has proved to be difficult. So this just kind of brings us up to modern technology, provides the ability for practitioners to be able to share that information in a more secure format as well. So we're asking for your approval on this.
So I have some clarifying questions on this. Do we already own the hardware that this software is going to be installed on? So we have adequate hardware already in place to do this. And are we one of those beta contractors?
No.
Okay. Bummer.
I don't do beta contracts with software because it turns out to be a nightmare.
That's probably a good idea. Oh, it would have been cheaper.
Yeah, right.
So there's a bunch of different training options in the contract. Are we going to actually have on-site training, or are we going to rely on the web?
No, we will have on-site training.
Great. Glad to hear that. So will those medical records integrate with other providers like HMS or that kind of stuff? How will, so there's going to be a medical record created while a person is incarcerated. And once they're released, those medical records may have stuff in them that their next provider would need. How is that transfer going to be made?
That I don't know, because that is between whoever that provider is, whether it's HMS, Silver Healthcare, and the current provider. Those are business associate agreements that we don't. So that will be up to them, and I don't know. I can't tell you if the platform that they utilize works with all of them or not. I just know that this is something that our detention center needs right now. It's something that we should have done. Records back and forth. So I can't answer what that holds in the future, because that's something that is worked out amongst providers. So I can't tell you that.
So
right
Vital Core and HMS would have a conversation about how those medical records are dealt with somehow.
Right, and they call that a business associate agreement. And I know that Vital Core is working on one with the hospital, and I believe they may have one in place with HMS already. But I know that they're working on that and that they're having those discussions. But it's a matter of a interface or a platform to where they share that data. But that's amongst providers.
So then, so I'm moving on to a different question. So if you wanted to clarify something.
Well, no, maybe I missed the boat on this whole thing. So we're gonna have medical records on our inmates. We're gonna save those medical records. For what purpose?
Well, for instance, many times we have tort claims that come up, and then we have to provide those records. I will tell you there's an instance where we haven't been able to provide some records for IPRA requests because the previous provider took them with them.
So those, and
these will become our custody.
And I'm looking at liability here, because, so those records will not be used if the inmate goes back again, because there may be a gap to where they may have gone to the doctor when they weren't incarcerated, and a sole decision on a diagnosis or whatever on those records could create a problem, correct?
So that's the idea, is being able to share that data and getting all of the providers to have those business associate agreements to where they can have access to each other's medical records to know that right now what's happening is the doctors are making phone calls back and forth. If we get this process in place and they develop all of those agreements amongst each other, then yes, they can have that agreement in place that allows them to look and say that, inmate Anna saw someone at Silver Healthcare while in between incarcerations or whatever, and that we have that data available so that we're making the best possible medical decisions we can without making phone calls, faxing information, things that are not as safe and secure as they should be. So this brings us up to be compatible and do things maybe in the 21st century.
I understand that. I can see a gap that could be a little dangerous there for us.
Well, that gap is there now.
And if there isn't sufficient communication, or it could get us in trouble, and then we'll really be using those records for courts and stuff. But
So I'm assuming that the business association agreements, is that what you call it?
Business associates agreement?
Business associates agreement. Those agreements would have all the HIPAA language and all that kind of stuff in it that would protect the confidentiality of those records, taking that out of our hands, correct?
Yes.
Which, now that you've said all this, is the reason why we have those agreements, so that we're out of that, right? Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my last question is, I understand why we're doing this and all that, but there is some language in the agreement that says that the records are going to be in the cloud, and that even if we terminate our agreement with Sapphire, those records will still be in the cloud where we can access them. What it doesn't say is what will happen if Sapphire goes out of business. There's a cloud, I don't even understand how this works really, but if Sapphire went out of business and we had a tort claim, where would those records be? Do you know?
It's my understanding, and the way that they've explained this to me is, help me out if I'm incorrect with this, Mike, it's in the cloud, it's our data, it's our record. Right now, they're not our records.
So we don't need proprietary software or anything to access that. It's out there. We can go access it whenever.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Well, I think your question about bankruptcy is appropriate because someone's paying to host that on a server somewhere. It's probably pennies, but there should be somewhere in their contract an understanding of what happens, what the successor, interest is in that data.
Well, I can table that and have it adjusted.
I'm not worried enough to make it stop the agreement. I would assume it's a totally standard situation for companies who store data in the cloud. I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
Well, and it could be just I don't understand all that, so.
Someone's got to pay the electric bill.
Right, yep. Okay.
Any other questions or concerns? Moving on to resolutions. Consideration of Resolution R-1945, a resolution recognizing the special values of the Hilo headwaters and supporting a wild and scenic designation. Is there anything else that needs to be said regarding this?
Not unless anybody had questions about any of the proposed
You do
changes.
have the proposed changes that Commissioner Brown put forward. Those were emailed to you. Hopefully you were all able to open them. You could open them on a PC, but not a phone, and then you could open it on the phone. I don't have any explanation why you couldn't see all the red lines via mobile device, but.
Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't either. I couldn't see them once, and then all of a sudden they showed up on the next time I looked. So I
used Microsoft Word's track changes, and I think some ways of looking at Word documents allow that and some don't. That's all I could conclude. So I'm sorry about the confusion that caused. I guess I want to say one thing, and that's that there's nothing in this resolution that says we want the legislation that gets introduced to specifically identify what the citizens' proposal has. Right? It seems to me this just says we want some legislation protecting it through the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and the details about which stretches qualify will be worked out in that great sausage factory in D.C., right? They're the ones who are going to end up deciding which segments get named. So I was actually sympathetic to what some of Supervisor Mendonca's comments were about they might not all be appropriate for wild and scenic. He's obviously got a lot more designated as recreational. I do not think we as a commission are in the position to decide among those different proposals. I just want to see some legislation passed, and I think that's what this resolution does. If other people have different interpretations, I wanted to bring that up now so I could hear you.
Yeah, my concern is that with Adam saying that we'll have two plans to compare side by side if we wait till next year, I don't see the urgency in this. I'd like to compare the two plans and make a more informed decision. I'm also sympathetic to, and actually curious to, some of the claims that were made this morning. Hagen Forward from Catron County seemed to be reading out of the plan itself when, and I'll go back through my notes and be prepared more to talk about that on Thursday, but it sounds like there's some endangerment to private property rights. And then someone, one of the other speakers, I think it was Commissioner Paxson from Sierra County,
right. Yep.
Expressed the same concern. So I'd request that the commission table this till we have a plan to compare next year with the two, and make rather than making a blanket statement that could be interpreted every which way, a more informed and educated resolution, if any, at that time.
You know, and that's a good point, because sitting here out of all this, I'm getting is everybody has a plan, but nobody's provided us with a plan. You know, and I'm talking Congress has a plan, Forest Service has a plan, but you know, I can only go off of what I've read and what two different groups, and I'm talking about what Senator Udall's group and Senator Heinrich's group have given us. So, I mean, I don't know what your wishes are or what.
Well, I think I'm inclined to agree with Harry in that it says that we support the introduction and passage of legislation, but it doesn't have anything specific about it, and I do not think that it is up to us to decide what specific portions would be protected. Nor am I guessing that we would have the authority to say that, even if, I mean, we could, if the final proposal had sections in it we did not want to have on there, we could do another resolution that said that, but I think what we're asking is not specific, and nor do I think that that's our job to decide that. I think that's up to the Forest Service and Congress. So.
Yeah, my concerns that I'll express better on Thursday are the threat to private property rights and the amount of unanswered questions we have relative to that if they were indeed reading out of the Wild and Scenic Act itself.
May I respond to that part?
Yes.
I was going to do this during my comments, but you've identified exactly the worst of the fear-mongering that I think counts as a lie, actually. I'm looking at the same language that they're looking at. And this business about 25 years that you can stay on your land, that's in subparagraph G, section 1. And it only applies to property that has been acquired by the government. It does not apply to property that happens to be along a wild and scenic stretch unless it's been acquired. Certainly doesn't apply to property along a tributary, as Mr. Ford suggested that all tributaries automatically are, the phrase he used, encompassed in this. if the government acquires property through donations, not condemnation, you can condemn an easement, as he mentioned, but not property, then the agreement can allow, if the owners wish, continued occupancy up to 25 years in length. So I do think it's a wise idea for all of us to read this. They were reading from the Act. They just weren't giving us the context of that passage.
You know, and I was going to say this for my comments too, but since we're here, you know, looking at the information that I have received, you know, private property Act does not give federal agencies authority to regulate private property. Grazing, you know, Act does not give federal agencies authority to regulate private land. You know, looking at all this and looking what has been provided to me, you know, I don't have a problem with it at all. Now, down the road, if we are misled or after the public input comes out and there's things that I'll say that maybe I was misled on, then I think I'll be the first one to speak out and put it back on here. We've done it before. I don't know what everybody's wishes would be, but we can undo the resolution. But, you know, the information that I've got here and what Commissioner Donna said, I don't have a problem with this at all.
Moving on, item J, consideration of resolution R-1957, a resolution of support and financial commitment for Corey Camino's transportation services. This goes along with the budget she submits, and Kim will be here on Thursday to review on that and answer any questions you might have.
That's the same two-part kind of thing as DUI,
yes, in kind
right?
of cash, yes. Item K, I'm going to read off item K, L, and M so Misha can talk about all of those at the same time. Item K is consideration of resolution R-1958, a resolution to apply for funding from the New Mexico Water Trust Board for Bandoni Flood Prevention Project and Fleming Tank Flood Prevention Project. Item L is consideration of resolution R-1959, allocation of funding for the 2020 Water Trust Board application for Bandoni Flood Prevention Project. Item N, consideration of resolution R-1960, allocation of funding for the 2020 Water Trust Board application for Fleming Tank Flood Prevention Project. You can explain why we have to do that.
Commission. So the reason that there are three resolutions, the first one is just a single resolution to allow me to apply for both of the projects. I combine them both in one resolution versus having four resolutions. The other two resolutions have to be independent because each application that I submit has to allocate from the commission that they agree to the 10% funding requirement. Our intent, both of these projects, we are currently paying for or have already paid for the design, and it is my understanding, and that is the way that I plan to move forward, is that we will have already met a majority of that because we've paid for the design. But in the event that that is denied, which I don't believe it will be, I am requesting that you guys understand that if we get awarded the $567,199.75, we do need a match. So if it needs to be a cash in kind, that's what this board is allowing me to do. Same thing with the that was the Bandoni, the Fleming tank is $850,000, so that would be an $85,000 commitment. So that's why I have to have two separate resolutions for each one of the applications. Any questions?
What would be the one for Bandoni?
Bandoni would be $56,720. I just rounded it up.
So we're looking at around $140,000 of match for both, if we get funded for both projects, of which you believe us already having paid for the engineering and design will cover, but just in case And has the $140,000 been budgeted?
No.
Okay.
I had a question over here about what we've spent so far, and I think it's somewhere around 120,000, so.
There's a general line item for matches already in the budget. In a sense, you could say that has been budgeted, but just not specifically for this project.
And these projects would be awarded next year, so we would go through another budget cycle.
But we've been led to believe that the money we've spent qualifies as that match, but you know how things in Santa Fe happen.
Yep. Right. Okay.
Any other questions? Anything else you need to add? You done? Okay. Item N, consideration of resolution R-1961, authorizing and approving submission of a completed application for financial assistance and project approval to the New Mexico Finance Authority for road equipment. This application is for $599,000 for 3 dump trucks. We approved this in the budget. I think Linda gave you a pretty good explanation. Is there anything you want to add to this?
Members of the board. No, I think I pretty much outlined everything in the detailed description of the resolution, but I'd just like to remind you that we will be done with the debt service for the fair building, and so this would free up those funds to be able to make those annual payments.
So it wouldn't have an impact to the budget because it would just, we have one piece of debt falling off, this one coming on.
There's a very strange formatting problem with the third, whereas you might be aware of it. But, there's no wording needs to be changed. It's just the 2 columns thing needs to be changed so it reads properly. So can easily be addressed by Thursday.
Okay, we'll fix it. Any other questions? Next item, O, convening as a Grand County Healthcare Claims Board, reconsideration of appeal denied December 2018 health claims in the amount of $19,439.45. Do you want to explain it or want me to?
You go ahead and look in your packet. There's an email that's attached along with the letter with those that were brought up for reconsideration. She did state, we did clarify, we had a meeting with Charlene, the Director of Financial Services, and myself, and those 5 were billed to Medicaid.
So what they did is, in their explanation, which I requested for their explanation for, they said they billed patients personal insurance. So I wanted clarification if that was truly personal patients or personal insurance or if it was Medicaid. And what they did is they billed Medicaid, whether it was Presbyterian or the other, I think it was an email. So that is what they did. We did clarify with her, and the new director seems to very clearly understand that there's absolutely no reason that they should be billing Medicaid because Medicaid is suspended at the time someone is incarcerated. She seems to understand that. She seems to understand that she has to submit claims in a timely fashion in the 90 days. They have done that since we denied these claims. Bernadette's been receiving things in a timely fashion, but for whatever reason, they billed Medicaid. They shouldn't have. That was the delay. So it's ultimately your decision whether or not you want to continue to make a statement and deny these or go ahead and pay for them.
So do we know if Medicaid paid them?
No, Medicaid didn't pay for them because their Medicaid is suspended while they're incarcerated. Okay. So there was no reason for them to. They wasted 90 days billing Medicaid. So no, Medicaid won't pay for anyone's claim because their coverage is suspended. If they have Medicaid, once they become incarcerated, their coverage is suspended until they are released from incarceration, and then it is reactivated if they follow all the right channels.
Thank you for that. Thanks for following up.
So recommendation to approve, right?
Yes.
I won't be that difficult, sure. And that can get your agenda.
Okay, so we're done there, right? So moving on to commissioner reports. Commissioner Billings, you have any report?
Not today.
Commissioner Brown?
No, I've already gone into my report about the fear-mongering during the public input session.
Commissioner Edwards?
So I do have a couple of things. I just want both of these items to be in the record, so I'll do this during my comments. We got an email from Randy Villa that had a letter from the state of New Mexico CYFD thanking Cindy Blackman for her hard work as our DWI program administrator, and it's very short, so I just want to read it very quickly. Dear Mr. Villa, this letter is in recognition of the efforts by Mrs. Cindy Blackman in promoting community-based services. As District 6 JPO supervisor, it is rare that I have witnessed the devotion of an individual such as Mrs. Blackman. On July 30th and August 22nd, 2019, she dedicated time to assisting us in interviewing and selecting the optimal surveillance officer. Her contribution of her time is a true demonstration of her dedication to our community and its success. She truly exemplifies a service-oriented individual. I just wanted to share with you my extreme appreciation of her as the Grant County DWI Prevention Administrator. She is truly an asset to our community. Signed, Rachel Medina, JPO Supervisor for Grant County. So thank you, Cindy, even though she's not here. We really do appreciate the work that you do for the county. The other thing I want to mention is, this was also in our email, but I think it's important enough to mention out loud. Lee Gruber, the Silver City Clay Festival's founder and director and former owner of Suzuki Tile, has been awarded the Governor's Award for Excellence in the Arts. It's a very prestigious award. And I think that Lee absolutely deserves this as a major contributor to the arts and to our community. The other thing that is going to happen in conjunction with this that I think also bears mentioning is the governor is going to be here during the Outdoor Recreation Conference on the 3rd and 4th, and while she is here, she is going to have a meet and greet at Syzygy Tile to acknowledge the fact that Syzygy Tile is a very important part of our economy here in Grant County, and to acknowledge that the business was actually sold to one of their employees, keeping the business as a sole proprietor and Grant County owned business. So I think that is also, we should appreciate that that has happened and acknowledge Lee's contribution to that, and her husband as well, David Del Honco. Thank you. That's it for me.
That's it. Anything else, Commissioners? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I'll second the motion to adjourn.
All those, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.